Miguel Alvarez walked into class with nothing but a notebook and walked out humiliated. His professor accused him of cheating. His classmates laughed, and someone whispered, "Figures, he's not from here anyway." But what none of them knew was that Miguel had already cracked a code their entire department couldn't solve, and the moment he reveals it, their laughter dies. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The computer science lab at Westbridge University buzzed with a familiar mix of clicking keyboards, murmured conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. Rows of glowing monitors reflected tired eyes, some students buried in code while others idled away, confident in their own sense of belonging. At the very back, sitting at a station that seemed deliberately chosen for its quiet seclusion, was Miguel Alvarez. He kept his posture low, shoulders slightly hunched, dark hair falling just enough to shadow his eyes. His fingers moved with subtle precision, tapping out lines of code, like a pianist hitting notes no one else could hear. He didn't need anyone's validation. He never had. But the air in the lab wasn't neutral. It was charged with the unspoken hierarchies of a campus where appearance and confidence often outweighed skill. Near the front, commanding more attention than the professor himself, sat Chad Whitmore, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of swagger that suggested life had rarely told him no. Chad thrived in the spotlight. His voice carried across the room, loud enough to interrupt concentration, as he cracked jokes that weren't particularly clever but always earned laughs. Chad had money, connections, and a last name that made faculty nod just a bit longer than necessary. He had also decided, consciously or not, that Miguel was his perfect target. Miguel had spoken maybe twice, all semester. When he did, it was soft, careful, and with the slightest trace of an accent, inherited from the Spanish spoken at home. To Chad, that quietness was weakness. To others, it was invisibility. Finally, he drawled loudly, "Something worth my time. Guess it's bad news for the rest of you." His eyes swept across the room before landing, predictably on Miguel. "And hey, Alvarez, don't worry, maybe they'll grade yours on effort." The words hung in the air like smoke. Laughter erupted around him, sharp and unkind. Some students turned toward Miguel with smirks. Others shook their heads, silently relieved it wasn't them. Miguel's hands froze above his keyboard. His chest tightened, but he didn't look up. He had learned long ago that eye contact in moments like these only fueled the fire. Inside, however, something twisted. He wasn't angry. Anger was too easy, too predictable. What he felt was a familiar weight, a reminder of every time someone assumed silence meant ignorance, or an accent meant incompetence. He inhaled slowly, forcing the sting deeper into the quiet place where he kept such things locked. Dr. Keene either didn't hear the comment or chose to ignore it. He launched into instructions, outlining constraints and expectations. Students bent over their keyboards, typing furiously as the timer started. Miguel's fingers resumed their steady dance across the keys, where others rushed in, hacking solutions together in messy bursts. He approached the problem like a craftsman. He analyzed patterns, streamlined logic, trimmed excess. His face remained expressionless, but his screen filled with elegant structures, loops and conditions flowing seamlessly into one another. Meanwhile, Chad's typing was loud, performative, almost aggressive. He leaned back frequently, stretching theatrically, tossing glances around to see who was watching. His monitor displayed a bloated mess of code, but he wore confidence like armor. The laughter from earlier lingered in the corners of the room, unspoken but alive. Miguel felt it pressing against him, a phantom echo with each keystroke. Still, he worked. The timer continued its steady countdown. At the halfway mark, a few students groaned. Bugs were piling up, logic breaking down. Chad muttered something under his breath about rookies, loud enough to be heard. His friends chuckled on cue.
Miguel didn't look up. His program ran on the first attempt, the output precise. He tested edge cases, refining, sharpening, until the solution wasn't just correct but flawless. Then, quietly, he leaned back, folding his hands in his lap, letting the screen glow in silent victory.
No one noticed. Not yet. The timer buzzed, signaling the end. One by one, students submitted their code. Errors flashed red across several monitors. Groans mixed with nervous laughter. Chad submitted his confidently, despite the fact his program had crashed moments before. He leaned back, smirking as if success were inevitable. Then Miguel's turn came. His submission uploaded instantly, No errors, no hesitation. The system verified the output, displaying a green check mark on the projector for the entire room to see. For a fraction of a second, silence replaced the noise. Some students blinked in surprise. Chad's smirk faltered, though only slightly. Then the moment passed, swallowed by the professor moving on with the lesson. But Miguel felt it. The weight shifted, just a little. His heart beat faster, though his face remained still. It wasn't validation. He didn't need that. But it was proof. Proof to himself that their laughter didn't define him. That skill spoke even when he chose not to. Still, as he packed up at the end of class, he overheard whispers. A voice muttered, "Probably got lucky." Another sneered, "Bet he copied it from somewhere." The laughter started again, quieter but still sharp enough to cut. Miguel walked out, backpack slung over one shoulder, gaze fixed on the floor. The air outside felt cooler, freer, but the echoes followed. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself silence was strength. Yet deep inside, beneath the practiced calm, a spark caught flame. Because what no one knew, not Chad, not the professor, not the students who laughed, was that Miguel Alvarez had already solved problems far beyond the scope of their curriculum. Algorithms that professional researchers struggled with. Patterns hidden in codes most dismissed as unsolvable. In his notebook at home, ink filled pages with ideas far ahead of his time. Secrets written not for validation, but because his mind couldn't stop searching for order in chaos. And as he walked across campus that evening, the sting of mockery still in his chest, one thought pressed itself into his mind with quiet certainty. One day, they would see. No one knows Miguel has already solved problems their professor can't. The night after the lab incident, Miguel Alvarez sat at his desk in the small off-campus apartment he shared with two other students. The walls were thin, the carpet worn, and the kitchen sink always dripping no matter how many times the landlord promised to fix it. Miguel didn't complain. He had grown used to making do with little. What mattered was the desk, the single lamp casting its circle of light, and the stack of notebooks filled with dense equations and sketches of algorithms few would ever understand. On his laptop, lines of code scrolled across the screen, elegant and efficient. It wasn't homework. He had already completed that hours ago, faster than most of his classmates could even read the assignment. This was his world, the one no one else saw, where puzzles unfolded into patterns and what seemed impossible to others became a quiet rhythm beneath his fingertips. But as his fingers hovered above the keys, the memory of Chad's voice in the lab returned. "Maybe they'll grade yours on effort." It wasn't the first time Miguel had heard something like it. For years, comments like that had shadowed him, small cuts that accumulated until silence became his shield. He told himself he didn't care, but tonight, the words echoed louder than usual. Miguel's parents had crossed the border years before he was born, chasing a dream they never quite caught. His father worked long hours in construction, his hands calloused and scarred from carrying bricks and bending steel. His mother cleaned offices at night, moving quietly through empty hallways while others slept. They never complained about the hours, the fatigue, or the way people sometimes looked at them like they didn't belong. They told Miguel education was the way forward. Their sacrifice was for him. He carried that weight every day. Scholarships covered most of his tuition, but not enough. So he worked late shifts at a local diner, wiping tables, carrying trays, and pretending not to notice when customers spoke slowly to him, as if he didn't understand English. Sometimes they asked where he was really from, and when he answered, "Here," they frowned, unsatisfied. Despite everything, Miguel excelled. Not because anyone expected him to, but because he couldn't stop himself. As a child, he had taught himself programming from borrowed library books and outdated computers, discarded by wealthier families. While others played games, he dissected them, stripping away graphics to study the mechanics underneath. By high school, he was solving encryption challenges online under anonymous usernames, competing with programmers who had years more training and resources. He always won, but no one knew it was him. That secrecy was intentional. Miguel had learned early that attention came with a cost. In middle school, when he solved a math problem faster than anyone else, the teacher praised him, but classmates muttered teacher's pet and cheater. By high school, the praise turned into suspicion. How did he get the answer so quickly? Maybe someone gave it to him. He realized his brilliance didn't inspire admiration. It provoked resentment. So he stopped raising his hand. He stopped showing his work. He stopped letting anyone see the depth of what he could do. But the mocking in the lab was different. It wasn't just doubt or resentment. It was Chad turning his quiet into weakness, turning his background into a punchline. The laughter of the room replayed in Miguel's head long after he closed his laptop. It wasn't that he hadn't heard worse. He had, but something about this particular humiliation dug under his skin. Maybe it was the way Chad's words had drawn others in, giving them permission to laugh. Maybe it was that, for once, Miguel wasn't just dismissed. He was targeted. At the diner the next evening, the memory still gnawed at him. He moved between tables, balancing plates, forcing a polite smile. A group of students from campus sat in a booth, loud and carefree. They didn't notice him until one of them laughed about that quiet kid in the lab, mimicking Chad's tone. Miguel froze for a second, then quickly turned away before anyone could see his reaction. When his shift ended, he walked home through the quiet streets, the weight of exhaustion pressing against his shoulders. He thought about his father, still on construction sites at dawn despite his bad back. He thought about his mother, scrubbing floors until her knees ached. And he thought about Chad, laughing effortlessly, never worrying about tuition or bills or fitting in. The contrast stung. Back in his room, Miguel opened one of his notebooks. The pages were dense with diagrams, arrows, and scribbled notes. In them lay solutions to cryptographic problems his professors had only touched upon. It was his hidden world, where his mind ran free without judgment or doubt. Flipping through, he stopped at a page marked with a star. It contained the outline of an algorithm he had been developing for months, a system that could break down complex ciphers faster than any existing model. He traced the lines with his finger, his chest tightening. For years, Miguel had convinced himself that hiding was safer, that blending in was survival. But Chad's mockery had cracked that armor. Silence hadn't protected him. It had made him invisible, easy to dismiss, easy to ridicule. He closed the notebook, staring at the worn cover. His reflection in the dark laptop screen looked back at him, tired but sharper than he remembered. For the first time in years, he felt a pull towards something reckless. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Not in the way Chad or anyone else would expect. Not by shouting or demanding attention, but by doing what he did best, solving problems so complex they left no room for doubt, showing them, not with words, but with results, so undeniable that laughter would choke in their throats. The decision settled into him slowly, like a tide rolling in. The mockery hadn't just stung, it had lit a fuse. And Miguel Alvarez, the quiet kid no one noticed, was about to prove them all wrong. Miguel decides to prove them wrong, but not in the way anyone expects. Miguel woke before sunrise to the drip of the kitchen faucet and the hum of the refrigerator, the apartment still and cold. His decision from the night before felt solid now, like something placed carefully on a shelf inside him. Prove them wrong, quietly, completely. He brewed coffee and opened his laptop, planning to refine the cipher solver he'd sketched in his notebook. Instead, a notification flared across the screen. A campus meme page had tagged his class. The thumbnail was a grainy photo of the lab of him head bowed, hair falling over his eyes. The caption read, "When the group project needs English, but you brought effort." He stared at the image. The comments multiplied in real time. Bro had a script in another language, someone wrote. Does the grader speak effort? A third chimed in. He closed the tab, jaw tight. The words didn't surprise him. They were just louder now, packed into a single screen. He told himself it was noise. He told himself he had work to do. But noise has a way of vibrating in the bones. On campus, the whisper network did what whisper networks do, grew teeth and velocity. In the hallway outside Algorithms, Chad stood in a half circle of admirers, his laugh too easy for the hour. Look, I'm not saying he cheated, Chad announced, palms up, a diplomat of condescension. I'm just saying the professor said it was a 40-minute problem, and our guy clicked it out in what, 9, 10? I don't care how many YouTube tutorials you watched, that's not a thing. A boy in a varsity jacket leaned in. He had some special keyboard, right? Macro or whatever. Yeah, Chad said. Or some copy-paste site. Not his fault, different countries have different standards. The circle laughed. The sound slid down the hallway like oil. Miguel heard them before he saw them. He kept walking, eyes forward, as if the corridor were a tunnel, and the exit were a small square of light he could reach by not flinching. He passed so close to Chad that they could have brushed shoulders. Chad's voice rose. Hey Alvarez, he called, genial and sharp at once. You should teach me that trick sometime. Which one is it? Control C or Command C? Miguel stopped. He could feel eyes on his back waiting for him to fire, to give them a scene. He turned, expression even. It's called thinking, he said, voice calm. You should try it. A small gasp rippled through the circle. For a heartbeat, Chad's smile flickered. Then he recovered, eyes narrowing with something like pleasure. Cute, he said. Practice that in the mirror? Miguel didn't take the bait. He walked on, the corridor stretching, the doors lining it like a metronome. He heard a girl's voice, careful, uncertain, say, Chad. That was, and then the door to the lecture hall closed behind him. Inside, Dr. Keene moved through slides about greedy algorithms, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. Miguel took notes. His pencil was steady. Every few minutes, his phone trembled with another ping from the meme page, from group chats he hadn't asked to be added to. He put the phone face down and wrote faster. After class, as students filed out, a teaching assistant named Naomi lingered at the end of the row. She'd always been polite, a quiet person with quiet eyes. Today she looked unsettled. Hey, she said softly. Miguel, you okay? He searched her face for judgment, and found worry instead. That surprised him. I'm fine, he said. You know that page will move on, she said. It always does. They pick someone, and then they get bored. I'm not a trend, he said. I'm a person. I know, she hesitated. If you need anything, resources, office hours, just don't disappear. I won't. He meant it, even as a corner of him reflexively prepared to go silent, to fold inward until the storm passed. At the diner that night, he carried plates to a table of Westbridge students, the kind who wore branded fleece and had the easy posture of people who never had to count tips before paying rent. One of them looked up with bright performative recognition. Oh my God, she said. You're the guy from the lab. Miguel set down the plates. What can I get you to drink? Do you, understand the menu? Another asked, laughter already cocked. The table snorted. The first girl's smile collapsed. She glanced away, ashamed but too timid to challenge her friends. Miguel wrote water on his pad and stepped back, breath measured. The jokes were the same as they had been in middle school and high school, and apparently, in university. Only now they traveled faster and wore better shoes. During his break, he leaned against the back door, the evening air cool on his face. He dialed home. His mother answered, her voice small and tired through the line.
Hi, Matt.
You sound far away, she said. I'm on break. I'm fine. You're eating? Yes. His father's voice moved in from somewhere behind her. The scrape of a chair. Miguel? You don't have to tell us everything, his father said, but don't tell us nothing. Miguel swallowed. Campus is loud this week. Loud people are often empty, his father said. We did not cross deserts for you to be smaller than your mind, his mother added. And we did not come so you would be alone in rooms where people laugh at you. Find your people, or make your room so bright they can't ignore it. He listened to the cadence of their encouragement, to the weight of their history, and felt the decision from the night before anchor deeper. I'm working on something, he said. I don't want to talk about it yet, but I will. Soon. Then work, his father said. Let your work be louder than their laughter. He hung up and returned to his station. The last hours slid by, a blur of plates and checks and the clink of silverware. He walked home under a thin slice of moon, hands in his jacket pockets, breath fogging in the air like a secret he was still not ready to share. What Miguel didn't see, what no one saw, was the message that had already left Dr. Keene's inbox earlier that afternoon. It was short, dry, bureaucratic. To Academic Integrity Review Committee. Subject: Student Performance Anomaly. Alvarez. Note: Please examine submission time and code originality. Statistical outlier. The unexpected twist landed in Miguel's life the next morning, when he checked his university email before heading to campus. A subject line shone like a cold eye. Academic Review Notification. Algorithms 301. He read it twice, then again. The body was nearly apologetic. A routine software flag has identified your recent submission as an outlier. This is not a determination of wrongdoing. Please attend a brief meeting to discuss process and originality. He felt the floor tilt, just slightly. The meme page had been ugly. This was concrete. This had teeth. In Dr. Keene's office, the walls were a grid of conference posters and framed certificates. The professor pursed his lips, fingers threaded together. This is procedural, he said. Our system flags unusually fast solutions. My code was clean, Miguel said. You can read it. You can ask me to explain it. I did read it, Keen said. And for a beat his voice softened. It's excellent. Concise. But I have to follow protocol. You understand. Miguel watched him, the man's careful neutrality. I understand that if I were slower, we wouldn't be here. Keen blinked. It's not about... It is, Miguel said, quietly. It's always about what fits the pattern. I don't fit. Keen exhaled. Bring your notes to the review. Walk them through your process. It will be fine. Fine, Miguel repeated, tasting the word like a bland meal. Outside, the laughter on campus sounded different. Closer, more claustrophobic. The meme page had upgraded its joke. A new image. A stock photo of a trophy, with the caption "Fastest copy-paster alive." The comments didn't bother with subtlety now. Dude's on a student visa for sure. Let him keep the scholarship. He needs it to send home. Can we get captions on his code next time? Miguel typed a response 3 times and deleted it 3 times. He shut the app and opened a blank file instead. He began sketching out a small tool, something that could trace the lineage of code, look for fingerprints of logic, the human cadence behind syntax. Most people left trails in their style. Variable names, like habitual tics, patterns of breaking lines like accents in speech. He'd prove authorship the way linguists did, by rhythm. He realized midway through that the desire to prove himself to a crowd he didn't respect made his hands shake. He closed the laptop and pressed his palms flat to the desk. Prove them wrong. Yes, but on his terms, not theirs. At lunch in the student union, he slid onto a bench at the edge of the room. Naomi appeared, tray in hand, eyes flicking from him to the screen mounted on the wall. A student-run campus news show was playing. 2 anchors discussed the meme page situation, their voices feigning distance. Some say it's harmless, the woman said. Some say it's targeted harassment. Free speech, the man replied, shrugging. If you don't like it, don't follow. Naomi set her tray down. You're trending for all the wrong reasons. That's not an achievement, Miguel said. It's also not permanent, she said. The page will pivot by Friday to someone who tripped on the quad. When he looked up, he saw Chad on the other side of the union, holding court, thumbs flying across his phone. Their eyes met for a breath. Chad lifted his hand and mimed typing, grinning like they shared a joke. Miguel looked away first. By evening, the Whisper network had grown architecture. Anonymous posts, confessional threads, a concerned classmate emailing the department to suggest fairness checks. Someone DM'd Miguel a message that made his fingers go cold. If you care so much, go back and fix your own country's problems. He reported it and got an automated reply about policies and cues. He thought of his parents. He thought of the river his father described crossing in the dark, of the fluorescent mop water reflecting his mother's face in corporate offices empty of everything but night. He thought of the edges he'd shaved off himself to fit. At 10 o'clock, his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. Is this Miguel Alvarez? A woman asked. Her tone was clipped. Official. Yes. This is Donna from Academic Integrity. I wanted to give you a heads up. Your review meeting has been moved up to Thursday. That's tomorrow. Yes, she said. A slot opened. We thought you'd prefer to resolve it quickly. He almost laughed. Thank you, he said instead. After they hung up, he sat in the quiet. The apartment hummed. In the other room, one of his roommates laughed at a show. The ordinary domestic sounds made the world feel normal for a flash. And then the flash ended. He pulled out his notebooks and arranged them in a neat stack. He chose the one with the starred page, the cipher solver's skeleton, and slid it beneath the others. He didn't know why he did that. Maybe because it mattered more than the rest. Maybe because if he had to pull proof out of the air tomorrow, he wanted to reach for the thing that felt most like him. Before bed, he opened the meme page one more time, against his better judgment. The latest post wasn't a photo. It was a screenshot of an email from the department listserv. Names blurred, but the subject line visible. Guest speaker, National Cryptography Association. Call for university teams. Chad's team. Let's go. Imagine him trying to read the problem statement. He shut the app, but the phrase stuck. National Cryptography Association. Guest speaker. Call for teams. A shape clicked into place in his thoughts. Sudden and electric. The next morning, campus woke to posters on the bulletin boards and a mass email from the dean's office. The subject line glowed at the top of Miguel's screen, everything else momentarily dim, announcing the Westbridge qualifier for the National Codebreaking Invitational. Scholarships, sponsorships, and six-figure prizes. Miguel stared at it, heartbeat in his throat. As the notification bell chimed again and again, the email hit every inbox on campus before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops. Students shuffled into lecture halls and dining commons with phones glowing in their hands, faces tilted toward the blue light, voices rising in animated speculation. By mid-morning, the university buzzed with a single topic: the Westbridge qualifier for the National Codebreaking Invitational. It was the kind of announcement that didn't just ripple. It thundered. Flyers dotted bulletin boards by the hour, their bold black font promising prestige, six-figure prize, direct interviews with the nation's top tech firms, a chance to represent Westbridge on the national stage. For students in computer science, it wasn't just an opportunity, it was the pinnacle, the golden ticket. By noon, a crowd packed into the central atrium, summoned by an email promising an official address. The Dean of Engineering, a silver-haired man with the cadence of someone used to commanding rooms, stood at the podium. The sound system crackled, and the chatter fell away. Westbridge has always prided itself, the dean began, on producing innovators, thinkers, and leaders in the field of computer science. This year, we've been selected as one of only 20 universities nationwide to host a qualifying round for the National Codebreaking Invitational. His words echoed across the glass walls. A collective inhale rippled through the crowd. The Invitational was legendary, fiercely competitive, streamed live, its winners courted by Silicon Valley giants before graduation. The dean continued, "Our students will have the chance to compete, to showcase their skills, and to win not only a six-figure prize, but direct pathways to careers that shape the future of technology." His voice sharpened, the promise undeniable. The best among you will carry the name of Westbridge to the national stage. The atrium erupted into cheers, applause bouncing against steel beams and glass. Students leaned into each other, whispering, already forming teams, already calculating odds. At the edge of the throng, Chad Whitmore stood like he'd been waiting for this moment all semester. Arms crossed, grin bright, he soaked in the energy like a stage light. When the applause quieted, he cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Guess I'll have to clear some shelf space for that trophy." Laughter surged again, this time directed toward him, not at him. His friends clapped him on the back. "Easy money," one said. Chad raised his chin. "Six figures, job offers? That's mine. Honestly, I'll probably finish before they finish reading the instructions." The bravado rolled off him in waves, and students nearby nodded, amused but not entirely dismissive. Chad wasn't top of the class, but his confidence and his father's well-known donations to the university gave his words the ring of inevitability. Not far away, Miguel Alvarez listened from the periphery. His backpack straps were tight against his shoulders, his posture almost withdrawn. He didn't cheer, he didn't smirk. His eyes stayed fixed on the dean, expression unreadable. The announcement should have lit something in him. Excitement, dread, resolve. Instead, he felt an odd stillness, as though the noise of the atrium couldn't quite reach him. Six figures, job offers, recognition. He had dreamed of none of these, not in concrete terms. What he wanted was quieter proof. The dean finished with a flourish. "Registration for the qualifier opens tonight at midnight. May the best minds win." As the crowd began to disperse, Chad's circle grew louder. His friends treated the announcement as a coronation, his victory a foregone conclusion. "You'll crush it," one said. "Dude, you'll be national," another added. "Imagine the headlines. Whitmore wins Westbridge. Your dad will frame it." Chad smirked, enjoying the vision. Then his gaze slid across the atrium and landed, inevitably, on Miguel. "What about you, Alvarez?" he called, voice cutting through the chatter. "You gonna enter? Or is code breaking too advanced without subtitles?" The circle of friends erupted. The cruelty was casual, almost lazy, but it landed hard. Heads turned toward Miguel, some expectant, some uncomfortable. Miguel's face didn't change. He looked back at Chad for a long second, the silence stretching thin. Then he turned away, slipping through the crowd without a word. "Didn't think so," Chad said, grin returning. Behind him, a friend laughed. "I'll bet you a week's meal points he doesn't even sign up." "I'll double that," another chimed in. "Kid can't even handle a meme page. No way he handles this." The bets layered, casual but sharp-edged, carried on the air like smoke. Chad lifted his hand, sealing it. Done. Alvarez won't enter. And if by some miracle he does, he won't last the first round. The group laughed, already picturing their winnings. That night, the campus pulsed with energy. Coding clubs formed strategies. Friends crowded dorm rooms, laptops glowing past midnight, screens filled with encryption puzzles, mock challenges, tutorials hastily downloaded. In his apartment, Miguel sat at his desk, the same lamp pooling light across notebooks worn at the edges. The email announcing the invitational remained open on his laptop. His roommates had left hours earlier, joining friends to practice. The apartment was quiet except for the steady drip of the kitchen faucet. He thought of the whispers, the memes, the laughter. He thought of his father's voice. We did not cross deserts for you to be smaller than your mind. He thought of his mother. Make your room so bright they can't ignore it. At 12:01 a.m., Miguel's cursor hovered over the registration link. He clicked. The screen refreshed. You are now registered for the West Bridge qualifier. For the first time that week, Miguel allowed himself a small, private smile. Not wide, not triumphant, just a flicker, like a candle flame. Chad's friends bet Miguel won't even enter. But he does. The moment Miguel clicked registered, the noise beyond his apartment walls seemed to rise like a tide intent on breaching the door. He shut the laptop, breathed once, then opened it again. The registration confirmation glowed on screen. Plain black type. No fanfare. That was fine. He didn't need the world to applaud. He needed it quiet enough to work. He pulled his notebooks closer, the ones with dog-eared corners and margins thick with arrows and tiny runes of logic. He copied the skeleton of his cipher solver into a fresh file, then forced himself to do what he always did before he let the machine touch it. He traced the ideas in pencil until the turns in the maze felt like muscle memory. When the lines finally settled, he walked to campus. The computer science building after midnight looked like a glass ship run aground. Floors stacked in rectangles, rooms lit in islands. In the lab, the hum of idle fans and monitors made a soft mechanical sea. Miguel took a seat along the far wall, under a vent that clicked every 13 seconds, a sound he'd learned to ignore. He opened the practice portal for the National Codebreaking Invitational. Tonight's set was labeled Glasshouse 19 and Anvil Delta. He scanned the specs and felt the first clean spark of relief. These weren't trick puzzles for beginners. They were real problems, honest opponents. He set a timer not to race it, but to pressure himself just enough to keep the mind taut. As he worked, the rest of his life kept stitching through the drip in the kitchen sink, the way the diner's neon sign buzzed, the bruised blue of his mother's undereyes when she first put on her coat at dusk. Each thought brushed, then passed. He followed rhythm instead, mapping frequencies, testing shifts, letting the cipher's false trails fall away until the structure showed its ribs. His phone buzzed. A text from his landlord. Rent reminder. Late fee after Friday. Then another from the bursar. Hold will be placed if balance remains unpaid after this week. He put the phone face down and kept working. Fear had a sound. It was the hiss of static that tried to flatten concentration. By morning, he'd solved Glasshouse 19 twice. Once by hand, with his own substitutions. Once with the prototype solver he tuned as he went. He wiped his terminal history, packed up, and walked straight to his 8 a.m. class. Coffee turned his heartbeat into a soft hammer against his ribs. Chad was already there, one ankle crossed on his knee, speaking as if the room were a stage. Qualifier's basically a formality, he told a kid in a baseball cap. We'll have fun with it. Some people panic on timers, I don't. Yeah, the kid said. I heard the practice problems are brutal. Not for me. Chad grinned. He let his gaze drift until it landed. What about you, Alvarez? Get your macro keys warmed up. Miguel took his seat without looking up. I practiced reading, he said. It'll help me with the instructions. A few students snickered. A couple glanced down, suddenly busy. Chad's smile thinned. Cute. Save the jokes for the meme page. Dr. Keene came in and started the lecture. Miguel copied the board mechanically, his brain 30 seconds behind everything, because it had not fully left the lab. In the aisles, whispers floated. Someone behind him repeated quietly. Figures, not from here anyway. The words half swallowed, as if they were tired of their own cruelty but addicted to it. After class, a woman from academic integrity. Donna, the clipped voice from the phone, caught him near the stairs. Miguel, reminder review in an hour. In the review room, two faculty members he didn't know sat beside Dr. Keene, faces composed into bureaucratic kindness. Donna pressed record on a small device.
This is procedural, she said.
Unusual submission time. Exceptionally concise solution. Which I can explain. Miguel said, and laid out his notebook, open to the page with his rationale. He walked through each decision, the trade-offs, the time savings. He did not rush. At the whiteboard, he rederived the core loop from scratch. When a faculty member asked why he named his helper functions with paired nouns, he explained the mnemonic that had stuck since 9th grade, when he'd learned to tether logic to language, so his memory wouldn't slip in rooms like this. When he finished, they were quiet for a beat. Keen's expression carried the brief flicker of something like pride before it extinguished itself back into neutrality. We appreciate your thoroughness, Donna said. We will close the review with no findings. Please be aware future outlier flags may prompt further checks. Because I was fast, Miguel said, not quite asking. Because we have a process, she replied. In the hallway afterward, Naomi caught up to him. How'd it go? It's not a crime, he said, but they'll keep an eye on it in case it becomes one. She shook her head. I'm sorry. Don't be. Save it for someone who needs it. He tried to make it a joke. It landed like resignation. That night, the diner was short-staffed, which meant double sections, and a manager who kept glancing at the clock like it owed him money. A table of students worked on laptops between onion rings, turning the booth into a pop-up study hall. Miguel refilled their waters. One of them looked up, looked at him for a second too long, then whispered something to her friend. The friend snorted, and tilted the screen so she could see a meme before Miguel turned away. On his break, he sat on the back step with a torn paper cup and called home. His mother answered, breathless, as if she'd run to the phone. Nisha, I'm okay, he said before she could ask. Just tired. Sleep is important, she said, but we didn't come here for you to sleep. We came for you to use that head. He smiled, let the warmth of her faith rise like a small sun inside him. I registered for something big, he said. A code-breaking tournament. There was a pause, then the sound of his father's voice in the background, asking. She relayed. Ben came back. Your father says to break the code and not your back. Working on both. Miguel said. Eat, she said. And don't let boys with empty eyes make you think yours are closed. Back in the lab, past midnight again, the building had the same graveyard hum. He set up a new series, Anvil Delta, and a small suite of substitution ciphers, threaded with false positives. He tuned his solver to look for rhythm behind the letters, patterns that were like fingerprints people didn't know they left. He tested, refactored, tested again. He forced himself to step away twice to jog the stairs, and return with the algorithm shaking loose inside him. At 2:30 the door opened. Naomi stepped in, hair in a loose knot, a hoodie zipped to her chin. She stopped when she saw him, taking in the spread of notebooks, the perfectly ordered chaos. I figured you'd be here, she said. I study, he replied. She smiled. Small. Same. I used to run these practice sets when I was a senior. Didn't have the nerve to enter. I tell myself I didn't have time. Really, I thought if I lost it would prove something ugly, right? He looked at her. About you. About me, she said. About what rooms are built for who. She walked closer, scanning his screen, careful not to hover. Your approach is beautiful. He shook his head. It's work. He found the setting and toggled it off. Thanks. I didn't see you, she said, and it was both joke and promise. She slid a faculty keycard from her pocket, set it on the desk. If the door locks you out, tap this. I'll say I was here. You don't have to. I know, she said. Sometimes it matters that someone does. She started for the door, then paused. Chad's been asking the TA chat if we can verify your code during the qualifier in real time, to keep things fair. I told them no, but he's looking for angles. Miguel's jaw set. He'll find what he always finds. Noise. After she left, he sat with the quiet until it settled again. He ran Anvil Delta and failed his first pass by 3 minutes. He tore the solver apart and rebuilt the scoring heuristic, teaching it to stop chasing decoys. Second pass, 90 seconds faster. Third, faster still. He began to feel the puzzle writer in his bones, the choices they'd made when they placed their traps, human decisions with human footprints. He followed. Morning classes were a blur. Chad performed a commentary under every slide. When the professor introduced a sample cipher on the projector, Chad stage whispered, "Should we slow down the captions?" The room laughed, not loudly this time, but enough. Miguel wrote until the letters blurred. At lunch, as he crossed the quad, a campus paper photographer angled his lens at a cluster of students building a whiteboard bracket of who would crush the qualifier. Miguel's name wasn't on it. Chad's was. In thick black ink. Underneath, someone had added Miss Copy-Paste with a smiley face. A girl with a careful voice said, "That's not funny," and a boy replied, "It's just a joke." Miguel kept walking. That night he went back to the lab and skipped the easier set. He loaded Glasshouse 19 again, then a tougher one labeled Signal Noise. The problem had a reputation in forums he read silently, but never joined. No one at Westbridge had posted a finish under 5 minutes. He toggled off every setting that could ping a leaderboard, checked again and started the timer. The first pass was a failure. He checked his logs, found the hitch, a weighting mistake that favored Common English bigrams too early. He fixed it, ran again. The second pass came in at 6 minutes, 34 seconds. Solid, but not enough. He breathed through the urge to push blindly, took a pen and wrote the transformation chain on paper. When he saw it, where the writer had buried a false low-frequency trap, he felt the click in his chest. Third pass. He hit enter and watched the solver pour through the steps like water through a grate. 4 minutes, 8 seconds. The screen flashed green. He stared, not grinning, not yet believing, only feeling the air change. On a campus whiteboard 2 floors down, the practice record for Signal Noise still read 5:02. Nolan F. In the portal's local cache, Miguel's time sat under it now. Private. Anonymous. Not yet synced anywhere because he had disabled everything that could shout. His hands hovered over the keys. He could take the screenshot. He could send it to the meme page, or to Chad, or to no one. Proof was 3 letters away. Instead, he opened the browser's network panel. The portal used a chatty API, sloppy as student tools often were. He found the route it used to write results to the campus mirror. He also found something else. A background job that synced results regardless of opt-in, at 2-minute intervals to build aggregate charts, anonymized but often legible with a little context. He watched the countdown tick, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Miguel's fingers moved automatically. He wrote a tiny script to intercept the next sync, and replace his latest record with a prior run that barely broke 10 minutes. Nothing to notice, nothing to envy. He pushed it, and saw the job return a happy little 20. The timer hit 0. The sync ran. The portal's local cache updated. The campus mirror showed a perfectly dull time attached to the perfectly dull alias he'd chosen. He exhaled, slow. The record remained where it mattered. In his bones. In the way his hands still shook with the rush of having seen something through. Alone. He closed the tabs, wiped the terminal, and slid Naomi's keycard back beneath the keyboard where she'd left it. The lab hummed, unbothered. Down the hall, a vending machine clacked awake and fell still. Miguel stood, shouldered his backpack, and reached for the lights. As the room fell to half dark, his phone vibrated. A campus-wide alert lit the screen. Update: due to nationwide participation, the Westbridge qualifier has been moved up. Round 1 begins tomorrow at 6 p.m. He stared at the words until they blurred, feeling time itself tilt on its axis. His preparation compressed into a single day. His decision to stay invisible suddenly at war with the clock. The campus alert still pulsed at the top of Miguel's lock screen when the afternoon sun flattened into winter gold. The qualifier had been moved up. Round 1 would start at 6. The day folded into itself, hours compressing until each one felt like a held breath. Miguel kept his rituals small: rice and eggs, a glass of water, 10 minutes with his notebook to steady his hands. He checked the rules one last time. Standardized machines, scrubbed drives, no personal keyboards or scripts, no internet access, live monitors at the back for proctors to observe keystrokes. It was, in theory, the fairest room he'd ever enter. At 5:30, the engineering auditorium looked like a launch site. Folding tables filled the floor where chairs usually stood. Each table held a sealed laptop, a numbered placard, and a thin slip of paper with a login code. Screens along the walls looped a countdown and a logo for the National Codebreaking Invitational, Westbridge Qualifier. The air hummed with nerves and caffeine. Students drifted in, some in clusters loud with bravado, some alone with their headphones around their necks like talismans. Chad arrived at the center aisle like he owned it, a velvet rope swagger without the rope. 2 friends flanked him, both already narrating a story in which he won. "This is your room, man," one said, sweeping a hand the way a realtor shows a view. Chad laughed. Feels small already. When he reached his assigned table, he flicked the placard with a finger. 27. Lucky number. His eyes slid to the side, found Miguel a few rows back, and brightened with interest. Alvarez, he called. Not quite loud enough for an official to hear, perfectly loud enough for everyone else. You sure you read the no macros part? Miguel met his gaze and let it pass through him. You'll be okay, he said. They also said no shortcuts. A couple nearby students suppressed grins. Chad's mouth tightened, then unfurled back into a smirk. Donna from Academic Integrity stood near the back with a clipboard. Dr. Keene paced beside her, wearing the fixed smile of someone who wanted to be proud but had been warned to be neutral. Naomi hovered near the proctor's station, hands in her hoodie pockets, eyes scanning the rows until she found Miguel. She didn't wave, he didn't either. The glance was enough. A student volunteer stepped to the mic. Welcome everyone. Round 1 will be 90 minutes. You'll face 3 tasks. A simple substitution cipher to warm up, a mid-level transposition with distractors, and a final composite built from both, with a twist. The room rippled at the word twist. Your machines are reset. No external code will run. Submissions are auto-graded. You'll see pass-fail immediately. Top times advance. Question. A hand shot up from the front. Will results be on the big screen? Aggregated standings will display periodically by full name. The volunteer said. We want to celebrate your work. Miguel watched the room react. Some smiled at the idea of their names lit large. Others stiffened. He felt his chest pull tight for a beat, and then release. Hiding, he reminded himself, had kept him small. Tonight, the room was the size it was. The countdown reached 30 seconds. Keyboard settled. Water bottles thunked onto the floor. Someone muttered a prayer. Someone else laughed too loudly, and then grew quiet. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin. The room filled with a sound that was not quite typing, and not quite rain. The warm-up cipher appeared in a pale gray panel, a classic monoalphabetic substitution dressed in a new suit. Miguel glanced at it once, and recognized its gate. He sketched a quick letter frequency map on a scrap sheet. E and T doubled in one passage. ER appeared more than it should, unless, he paused. The letter frequencies were slanted. Not wrong, other. He toggled a mental gear and tested if the plimtext were Spanish rather than English, the pattern of vowels in the shape of digraphs would lean differently. Da, K, La, L. He whispered. Of course, and built the key backward, anchoring key A, and sliding the rest into place. The words emerged coherent, then crisp. He entered the plain text. Pass flashed in green. He glanced at the clock. 8 minutes spent. The rush tried to sprint up his spine. He breathed it down, and opened task 2. Rows shifted. In the front, Chad rubbed his hands theatrically, glanced around to see who was listening, and stage whispered, "They're going easy on us." His friends chuckled. He typed with the same loud keystrokes he used in class, as if he were punching the solution into submission. Task 2 was meaner columnar transposition, with dummy padding designed to mimic natural English bigrams. Miguel traced it like an outline of a body, not fooled by the pads posing as ribs. Someone behind him whispered, "He's not from here anyway," and it landed with the small thud of habit. Another voice answered, lower. "Maybe that's an advantage tonight." He didn't turn. He wrote the key, tested shifts until the redundancies collapsed. Pat. He flexed his fingers once, felt the stiffness of hours spent wedged between study and work. He thought briefly of his father's hands and the different kind of ache they held at the end of a day. Then he opened task 3. The final panel loaded. The composite wore a smile that wasn't friendly. A Caesar-shifted message had been re-encoded with a root cipher through a spiral grid, then salted with a predictable set of decoys, triads that resolved perfectly in English. If you accepted grammatical nonsense, the trick wasn't hard. The trick was time. Across the room, Chad pushed his chair back with a squeak, lifted both hands like a touchdown, and sauntered to the submission station. He dropped his entry like an expensive coat, and turned so the room could see him grin. "Light work," he said to no one, and everyone. His friends clapped. The monitor above the proctor's table pinged. A moment later, the standings board flickered on the wall. One Chad Whitmore pulsed white. The time next to it brisked. A swell of relieved laughter rose. The room loves a favorite, who behaves as expected. Naomi's jaw moved once, a muscle telegraphing skepticism. Miguel didn't look up. He had already stripped the grid, corrected the route, and was midway through detangling a shift that kept refusing to sit still. He could feel the trap in the design, the way the setter had tucked a second key inside the first. If you tried to brute force your way through, you'd waste minutes feeding the wrong machine. His cursor hovered. He stopped typing and listened to the pattern of the letters the way you listen to a stranger's accent. Not for vocabulary, but for music. The consonants landed like steps he knew. The vowels clustered like seeded ground. This one wasn't Spanish. It wasn't anything so clean. It was crafted to sound like English, until you looked at where the articles wanted to live. He mapped the spiral, reversed the path, then applied shifts not by frequency, but by a rhythm he'd taught himself years ago, when he realized logic has a cadence and ciphers him, when you tune yourself to them. A proctor drifted down the row, and paused one seat away, eyes on screens. Miguel felt him without seeing him. The old fear tried to open its hand inside his chest. What if they think speed is theft? He turned that fear into a vector, and kept moving. In the second row, a student raised her hand. Proctor? Question about the shift. She caught herself, flushed, lowered her hand. Another student sighed dramatically. A performance for the crowd. The keys tapped on. Miguel's final grid resolved. The message clicked into sense, not poetry, but grammar that held. He took one more breath and checked the timer. 17 minutes left. He pressed submit. Greenwashed the panel. Pass. The room didn't hear his success. It wasn't loud the way victory is on a field. No racket of net. No whistle. It was a quiet bulb that lit and waited. A minute passed. The board above the proctors flickered again. Standings refreshing on the slow beat of a campus network that had never been asked to care about this much attention. Names realigned. 1. Miguel Alvarez appeared at the top, a time that shaved minutes off the round. It took a second for the room to realize what it was seeing. Someone close to the wall peered, then said, "Wait," and then louder, "Wait." Heads lifted. A murmur moved sideways, the kind of sound crowds make when an expected script flips without permission. Chad stopped mid-stride on his victory lap, and looked up. His smile faltered, then flattened. One of his friends hissed, "It's a refresh lag. It'll fix." Another said, "No way." The two of them tried to smile for him, their faces stiff with effort. "Of course," someone near the back muttered, "sour." They probably gave him an easier set. A different voice, softer not innocent, added, "Figures. Dude reads the ones in Spanish faster." Miguel heard both and felt his neck heat. He could have said nothing. He almost always said nothing. But the proctor was near, and Donna stood with her clipboard, and the rules poster sat on an easel 2 feet from his table. He raised his hand until the proctor approached.
Yes.
"Could you confirm," Miguel kept his voice low, "that all stations received the same tasks?" The proctor blinked, then recovered. "They did." Miguel nodded. "Thank you." The proctor stepped away. The students who had whispered went strangely quiet. Donna leaned toward Dr. Keene and spoke behind her hand. He didn't answer, but Naomi, who had angled herself to see Miguel's screen when he submitted, exhaled, something like relief cracking her posture. Chad's friends regrouped. "He probably got lucky," one said. "Yeah," another added. "Sometimes even a clock that's broken is right twice." Chad stared at the board as if he could will it to change by glare alone. Laughter had lived so easily on his face all semester. Now it rolled away and left something flintier. Round 1 continued. Students who had frozen at the standings shook themselves and returned to the work because the timer did not care about anyone's pride. Miguel ran his eyes once more across the final solution. Not because he doubted it, but because he liked the way it fit together. Logic meeting design like two edges machined for each other. He saved his work to the ephemeral space the rules allowed and locked the screen. He sat back for the first time and let himself see the room. Above the main doors, a student photographer raised his camera and snapped the line of laptops and bent heads. Chad's circle had gone quiet in the way rich rooms do when something doesn't go to plan. Their silence was not admission, just recalibration. A volunteer with the mic returned to the front as the last minutes bled away. 2-minute warning, she announced. Submit your final answers. Keys flurried, then stopped in waves as people chose to fight with one more error, or surrender with dignity. When the timer hit 0, the machines relaunched their sterile lockdowns, and the lights in the room seemed to come up a notch, the way rooms do when concentration releases. Standings will update one last time, the volunteer said. Top 20 advance to round 2 tomorrow. The board flickered. Resolved. Flickered again. 1. Miguel Alvarez held. 2. Chad Whitmore sat below it. By 90 seconds that felt in a room like this. Like a canyon. The sound that followed wasn't an ovation. It was more complicated. A rustle of papers. A laugh here. Cut off. The sharp intake of someone who had won a bet they hadn't dared place aloud. On the aisle, a boy who had circled Chad's name on a printed bracket crossed it out so hard the paper tore. The girl who had said "that's not funny" at the whiteboard a day earlier allowed herself a small, unguarded smile. Chad broke the tableau by clapping his hands once. Loud. A single crack. Good. He said to no one. To everyone. Now we have a race. He kept his voice level, but the vein at his temple pulsed. He looked over the rows, until he found Miguel. Their eyes met across the fluorescent air. Enjoy it, Chad said, because he could not help himself. Sometimes the underdog gets a first round. Miguel held his gaze and didn't answer. There was nothing to answer. The room had already spoken. He packed his notebook slowly, slid the login slip beneath the keyboard, and stood. Near the doors, Donna checked a box beside his name on her clipboard, the line of her mouth unreadable. Naomi watched him pass and said, "Quiet, see you tomorrow." It sounded like a promise and, to Miguel's surprise, like a belief. At the threshold, a cluster of students parted and then half closed like a tide, leaving just enough space for him to pass without bumping shoulders. As he did, the meme page pinged phones on all sides. Underdog at Westbridge, a title written by someone who hadn't been there and didn't deserve the story. Screens lit, fingers flew, narratives reassembled. Miguel stepped into the hall's cooler air. Behind him, chairs scraped and talk resumed with the courage of distance. Ahead, the corridor stretched toward the exit in the darkness beyond, where the night would either settle around him or open. He took one step, then another. Behind him, Chad's voice cut through the low hum, stripped of its usual sugar. Alvarez. Miguel stopped without turning. In the reflection painted in the glass of the foyer doors, he saw Chad's face, all angles and calculation now, the easy grin gone. "I don't know what you pulled," Chad said. The syllables careful, "but it won't happen again." Miguel kept his eyes on the glass, on the doubled room, on the doubled self. "Maybe," he said, and his tone was not defiant, so much as tired of asking rooms for permission. Maybe it already did. He pushed the door open and stepped into the night. Behind him, Chad's stare hardened into something colder than a smirk, an acknowledgement edged with anger, because for the first time all semester he understood Miguel was not a punchline. He was a threat. While Miguel made his way home, another conversation was already beginning elsewhere on campus. This one not in the open auditorium, but in a room lit by the soft hum of fluorescent light and the low murmur of guarded voices. The faculty lounge on the third floor of the computer science building was rarely occupied this late. But tonight, 3 professors sat around the long oak table, half-empty coffee cups scattered between them. Keene, the professor who had overseen the qualifier, leaned back with his hands steepled. Across from him sat Professor Langston, a sharp-eyed cryptography expert, and Professor Walker, who oversaw undergraduate programs. Langston broke the silence first. Voice clipped. "I've reviewed the preliminary times from round 1. Miguel Alvarez finishing minutes ahead of the curve isn't just unusual, it's anomalous." Walker frowned. "Anomalous isn't wrongdoing. Some students are just talented." Langston's mouth tightened. "Talented, yes. But let's be honest, this boy has barely spoken up in class all semester. He doesn't participate, doesn't engage, keeps to himself. Then suddenly he crushes a national-level qualifier problem set like it's child's play. That doesn't strike you as convenient?" Keene rubbed his temple. "It was extraordinary, I'll grant you. But extraordinary doesn't equal impossible. I've seen his code. It's concise, elegant. The kind of efficiency you don't fake." Langston leaned forward, voice lowering. "Or the kind you download." The implication hung between them, sharp as broken glass. Walker shifted uncomfortably. "You think he cheated?" "I think," Langston said carefully, "that we'd be negligent if we didn't consider the possibility. The reputation of this program is on the line. If a scandal erupts, if it turns out some student imported foreign scripts or used backdoor exploits, we'll be asked why we didn't act sooner." Keene exhaled, looking toward the window, where the reflection of the overhead lights blurred against the glass. "Foreign scripts? You mean because his name is Alvarez?" Langston didn't flinch. "Don't put words in my mouth. I mean, because his background is opaque. I've looked at his file. Scholarship kid. Working nights at some diner. Barely has time to sleep, let alone produce solutions that rival graduate research. Call me cautious, but I don't believe in miracles. Walker shook her head. What you're calling a miracle might just be discipline. Some students work harder than we realize, especially the ones who have to. Keen's voice softened. I've seen that before. The quiet ones who don't fit the mold but carry the fire anyway. I don't want us to mistake bias for scrutiny. But Langston wasn't finished. Look, I've been in this field 30 years. Patterns matter, and Alvarez doesn't fit any I recognize. If he's genuine, fine, we celebrate him. But if he's not, and we let him through, we risk turning this whole invitational into a farce. Silence fell, heavy and brittle. Walker finally spoke, voice low. So what do you propose? Langston tapped the table with 2 fingers. A review, quiet, discreet. We comb through his submissions, check his keystroke logs from the qualifier, see if they align with human input or scripted automation. We can request his practice history from the invitational's portal. If there's nothing, fine. But if there's something, he left the sentence unfinished, the threat implicit. Keen looked tired. And if word of this leaks, we turn a victory into suspicion before the boy even has a chance to stand on it. Do you know what that does to someone like him? Langston's voice sharpened. Someone like him? Keen's gaze didn't waver. A student who already hears whispers. A student who knows every time he outperforms expectations, there are people waiting to say he didn't earn it. Walker sighed, rubbing her forehead. Maybe we're all projecting. Maybe he's just brilliant. But Langston only shrugged. Brilliance without pedigree is always suspect. Keen stood, his chair scraping softly against the floor. I'll oversee him in round 2 myself. No shortcuts, no excuses, no room for doubt. If he's genuine, it'll show. If not, we'll see. Walker glanced at him. And if the whispers start anyway? Keen hesitated. Then the boy will have to be louder than the whispers. What none of them noticed was the faint sound of footsteps outside the lounge. The door left ajar for air, carried voices into the hallway more clearly than they realized. There, leaning casually against the wall, a half-smirk tugging at his lips, stood Chad Whitmore. He hadn't meant to find the meeting, but curiosity and ego had led him here after hearing murmurs of faculty gathering late. Now he'd heard enough. Cheating, Chad whispered to himself, savoring the word. It rolled off his tongue like a promise. As the professors continued inside, debating fairness cloaked in bias, Chad slipped away down the hall, his footsteps light, but his mind heavy with calculation. Chad now knew he didn't need to beat Miguel at coding. He just had to turn suspicion into certainty. The door to Miguel's apartment stuck, as it always did, and then gave with a soft sigh. The living room flickered with blue light from a muted TV. His roommates had left open textbooks where a coffee table should have been, a half-eaten burrito cooling on a plate. The night tasted like victory and nerves, metal and sugar. Behind his eyes, the auditorium still shimmered, his name at the top of the board, Chad's smile collapsing into something hard. He wanted briefly to let the feeling expand and fill the room. Instead, he set his backpack down, opened his laptop on the kitchen counter, and waited for the familiar hum. It didn't come. The screen blinked twice, and offered a gray face he'd never seen before. Your device needs repair. The letters were too calm. He frowned, pressed the power button, and tried again. The same message, now accompanied by a tiny progress wheel that spun and solved nothing. Come on, he whispered. The directory was clean, too clean. No solver scripts, no rhythm maps, no logs. The subfolders that should have been heavy with practice sets felt weightless. He clicked documents. Gone. Projects gone. The notes. The text files where he'd explained choices to himself so that fear couldn't lie to him later. Gone. He stared at the screen, a pulse beating at his temple. He moved to downloads, where junk collected like silt. It was oddly intact. Syllabi, a receipt from the bursar, a spare resume he'd never sent. The useless things were fine. The work was missing. From the living room, his roommate Zach called. You back? How was the Nerd Olympics? Fine, Miguel said, voice flat. Did Chad win? Zach asked, disinterested enough to prove the question was really about something else. Miguel didn't answer. He opened his terminal and checked his bash history. It scrolled up a passage he had not written. install integrity-agent.chi, followed by cleanup.chi, and a perfectly timed RMRF on the folders he most needed. His breath shortened. The cursor blinked like an eye that had watched it happen. He typed, quietly, "I didn't install anything." "Talking to your computer again?" Zach said. "Talking to whoever touched it."
Nobody touched your stuff, man.
Zach's tone carried the bored edge of truth, or the performance of it. "I've been here." Miguel stared at the sequence. The commands were time-stamped at 7:42 p.m. He had been in the auditorium then, walking out under the fluorescence, with Chad's "Enjoy It" still in the air. He checked his login sessions. One showed local. Another at 7:39 p.m. showed remote VPN@westbridge.edu, with his credentials. "Impossible," he said.
His phone buzzed on the counter. A campus alert. No. A missed call from a number he didn't recognize. Then a voicemail. He put it on speaker, heart stuttering.
"Hello, Mr. Alvarez. This is Donna from Academic Integrity. We're deploying a light monitoring agent to students advancing to round 2, just to streamline logging across devices. It's standard. An email will arrive shortly with instructions. There's nothing to worry about." He closed his eyes. The terminal history had the agent's name, but the order was wrong. Why would the agent remove his work? An email pinged before he could decide what to feel. Subject: Academic Integrity Monitoring Agent. Action required. The sender looked right. The formatting clean. The tone friendly with a hint of warning. He toggled the header and scanned the path. The message had been relayed through a third-party service Westbridge used for mailings. Could be real, could be clever. He hit reply and typed, "Did your agent remove user directories?" He hovered and didn't send. If this was legitimate, he'd sound paranoid. If it wasn't, he'd be feeding a hook. Instead, he dialed the number in his call log. Donna picked up on the second ring. "Miguel?" "Yes. I got your message. My laptop." He forced his voice level. "My files are gone. The workspace. Everything." A pause. Donna's professionalism built a bridge. "Our agent shouldn't touch personal directories. It's read-only." "It didn't read," he said. "It erased." She exhaled. Papers shifted near her mouthpiece. "I'm in the office for another hour. Bring it by." "I'm not sure that's smart," he cut in, given the last review. He looked at the empty folders and thought of how truth sometimes wore the right clothes and still felt wrong. "I'll try recovery first. If the device is compromised," she said, "do not keep it online." He disconnected and shut off Wi-Fi. The apartment went oddly quiet without the invisible hum. Zach wandered in and opened the fridge. "You gonna freak if I finish your orange juice?" "No." "Cool." The carton glugged. Zach eyed the laptop. "You look like someone killed your dog." "They just deleted my brain." "Dude, it's fine. Cloud exists." "I don't use it," Miguel said. "Not for this." Zach shrugged, already halfway back to the couch. "Should've." Miguel opened a recovery utility he kept for exactly this nightmare, and let it crawl the drive. It found fragments, a few compiled binaries he could have recreated in hours. Not the notes that made them human. He tried a different tool, then a third. The screen stayed stingy. At 8:15 p.m., the meme page posted. Zach's phone flashed on the armrest. The notification hung long enough for Miguel to catch the words, "Sneak peek at the underdog's sauce." He crossed the room before he could stop himself. "Don't," Zach said, but handed the phone over anyway. The post was a grainy photo taken through the lab's glass wall the night before. You could see the edge of Miguel's profile, the back of his monitor, a window with his solver's output. The caption read, "Looks like someone practices with scripts. Hope the judges like macros." The comment thread pulsed with the predictable mix. Jokes about importing talent, earnest defenders immediately drowned out, and a handful of thinly veiled slurs. One comment from an account whose avatar was a trophy. "Fair is fair." Miguel stared at the username. Fair is fair." It was new. It felt like a mask someone put on when they wanted to say the same thing but sound noble. His phone buzzed with a text he didn't want to open. "Unknown. Enjoy your spring cleaning. See you tomorrow, speedster." The number was blocked for replies. He set the phones down and felt the room tilt. Not much, the way a floor shifts when a subway passes under it. He thought of Naomi's keycard still under the lab keyboard. He thought of how he had toggled off every public setting in the portal, how he'd written a quick intercept to drop his best time into the void, how careful he'd been to leave no story but the work. Someone was writing one anyway. His mind leaped to the hallway outside the faculty lounge. A face leaning in the shadow, a smile he knew too well. He clenched his jaw, then forced it to loosen. He would not name a culprit he could not prove. He was not going to hand them righteous outrage. It always looked bad on him. He called Naomi. "Hey," she answered, voice low, the sound of a library behind her. "My laptop's been hit," he said, "files gone." "The agent? Did the department send that?" She was quiet for a beat. "They're piloting one for round 2. Read only. Supposedly." "It wasn't," he said, "and someone used my VPN credentials. That shouldn't be possible without." She stopped. "Screenshots are circulating. A view from the lab last night. I saw. I told the TA chat to report the post," she said. "Half of them are arguing about free speech. We'll get it down eventually. Eventually is a long time." "I know," she said. Then, softer, "You should come to the lab. We can try forensic recovery on a clean machine. I have a boot drive. I can't be seen there tonight." He imagined a camera catching him after hours with hardware. The rumor wrote itself. "Then meet me at the library's basement. Study room B. 10 minutes. He hesitated, then grabbed his coat. "Okay." On his way out, the landlord knocked 3 sharp raps. "Rent," he said through the door, apologetic only because the hall magnified his voice. "Friday." "I know," Miguel said. "I'll have it." He stepped into the cold. Campus had a nighttime face he liked. Bricks softened by lamplight. Paths empty enough that footsteps were not a crowd, but a rhythm. Tonight, that elegance felt like a set. Somewhere, someone had moved a prop while he wasn't looking. In the library basement, Naomi had a small arsenal on the table. A clean laptop, a USB boot drive, an external enclosure. She looked up when he entered, and without preamble, slid the enclosure toward him. "Take your drive out," she said. "We'll mount it read-only. No more surprises." He worked in silence, the almost tender care of unscrewing the case, lifting the drive like a fragile heart. Naomi watched his hands and after a minute spoke. "You don't have to say it," she said. "I know who you think did this." "I don't think," he said. "Thinking is for when you have data." "Fair enough." They mounted the drive. Her tools found more than his had. Ghosts of files, snippets of logs, enough to prove he had been working. Not enough to restore the world inside those directories. She pointed at the metadata. "I don't have admin," he said. "Then whoever did this had a way in," she said. "Or the machine thought they were you." He leaned back, exhaustion and adrenaline incompatible in his veins. Everybody always wants a shortcut. They don't realize the long way is the point. Naomi's mouth pressed into a line. "Tomorrow you'll have to solve cold. No notes, no tools, just your head. That's all I've ever had." She opened her mouth to say something comfort or warning, and then her phone vibrated. She read the screen, went still. "What?" he asked. "It's the dean," she said. "He wants faculty to ensure fairness optics tomorrow. That means more eyes on you. Cameras, logs, people in the room who think their suspicion is the same as diligence." He smiled without humor. "They'll get a great show." They copied what they could to a clean drive, then shut everything down. At the door, Naomi touched his sleeve. "Miguel, whatever happens, do not let them tell your story for you." "I don't have the microphone," he said. "Then be the part that doesn't need it." Outside, the night had thinned further. The library's glass reflected him the way the auditorium doors had doubled. Distant, a boy inside a boy. He walked back to his apartment, with his laptop cradled like a casualty. In his room, the laptop sat on the desk, mute. He opened the top drawer, and took out the oldest thing he owned that was still his. A black composition book, edges frayed, pages inked dense with handwriting, that had matured as he did. After that, another blue, then red, then plain gray. He stacked them like bricks until the desk looked too small to hold them. On the first page of the first book, in a margin he had carved as a teenager, a note to himself. "If you ever get scared, write it by hand. Paper can't crash." He sat. He flipped to a starred page, and traced a map of an algorithm, with his finger. Each line brought back not just the logic, but the nights he had given to it. The diner grease that never fully washed from his hands. His mother's voice telling him to sleep. His father's silence when the back pain was bad. The room steadied. His phone vibrated on the desk again. Another text from unknown. "Round 2 is in a stricter room. No shortcuts. Let's see you swim." A second followed before he could block it. Bring a dictionary. In English. He put the phone face down. He didn't answer. The ink on the page did. He began to copy the skeletons of the solvers he had lost. Dictionary. In English. He put the phone face down. He didn't answer. The ink on the page did. He began to copy the skeletons of the solvers he had lost, not as code, but as logic ladders, as if he were teaching a future version of himself, who might need reminders when fear tried to pass itself off as reason. The despair that had crept in when the drive looked empty was still there, but it had company now. Anger, yes, but something steadier beneath it, a refusal to let the story be stolen. In the living room, the TV laughed at a joke he didn't hear. In his inbox, the agent email waited. A small white lie in a black font. On campus, the meme page churned, its engine fed by students who would forget this in a week, but would always remember the feeling of being on the side that laughed. Miguel turned a page. He tightened his grip on the pen the way he tightened his grip on himself. The notebook smelled like paper and time. He did not have his laptop. He did not have his directory of proofs. What he had was the thing that had built those proofs in the first place. He pulled another notebook from the drawer, thicker, the one he rarely showed even to himself, and flipped it open. The pages were crowded with notations and arrows, the handwriting small and urgent, a blueprint to a mind other people said couldn't possibly exist, where it did. The lamp haloed the desk. Miguel placed the tip of the pen on the paper, and the room seemed to hold its breath. He slid the oldest notebook into the center of the desk, the one filled with handwritten algorithms no one knew about, and turned to the first starred page, ready to rebuild what they tried to erase. The morning of round 2 arrived with none of the ease of victory. Miguel's room still smelled faintly of ink. The notebook spread across his desk like a graveyard of secrets. He hadn't slept, at least not properly. He had drifted for 20 minutes at a time, jolted awake by the thought of empty directories, of unknown texts, of Chad's grin in the hallway outside the faculty lounge. His body was heavy, but his mind carried a strange alertness, like a wire pulled too tight. By late afternoon, the auditorium filled again. The atmosphere had shifted. Less like a spectacle, more like a tribunal. Security was tighter. Faculty proctors carried clipboards, notepads, and in some cases, portable cameras mounted discreetly on tripods. The rumor of fairness optics had traveled fast. Whispers spread even before students sat down. They're watching Alvarez. Miguel stepped into the room with nothing but a notebook tucked under his arm. No laptop. No external drive, just the same black book that had carried him through the night. Some students stared openly. Others avoided his gaze, as if looking too long might drag them into his story. Look at him, Chad muttered to his friends, as Miguel passed, coming to a gunfight with crayons. The joke landed with brittle laughter. Miguel didn't flinch. He walked to his assigned table, this time near the front, in full view of the proctors. The placard bore his name like evidence. He sat, placed the notebook down, and folded his hands. The countdown ticked on the screen. The room was quieter than round 1 had ever been. The silence threaded with suspicion. A volunteer at the mic gave the instructions. Round 2 will be 2 hours. You will face one major task, a layered cipher designed to simulate real-world conditions. Solutions must be coded from scratch on the provided systems. No external resources permitted. Results will auto-grade. Standings updated in real time. Chad leaned back in his chair and called out, "So if anyone tries to cheat, we'll all see it?" The proctors ignored him. Miguel opened his notebook, turned to a blank page, and wrote the date at the top in careful block letters. It was not for record, not even for memory. It was ritual, the way he told himself he was beginning, not drifting. The timer began. The challenge filled the screen. A substitution cipher embedded in a transposition grid, salted with randomized nulls, disguised further with a secondary key that shifted every nth character. A deliberate knot. Miguel read the problem once, then again. He saw the bones of it, the choices of whoever had written it. He felt the rhythm of their design, like a song he recognized. Other students launched into typing, filling the air with frantic keystrokes. Miguel didn't touch his keyboard yet. He drew instead, boxes, arrows, substitutions, the scaffolding of logic. The notebook absorbed his thoughts, without blinking. Chad's keys clattered, loud enough for the row to hear. "Oh, this is baby stuff," he announced. "Hope you brought a puzzle book, Alvarez. You'll need it." Miguel ignored him. He finished the map, lifted his hands, and began to code. The provided machine was clumsy, the keyboard stiff, the environment bare, but his fingers moved without hesitation. He wrote functions like he'd been waiting all night for this, naming them with the quiet mnemonic pairs that had lived in his head since ninth grade. His code didn't stumble, didn't pause. It streamed across the screen like water finding its bed. A proctor leaned to another. "He's not even backspacing." Another whispered, "No compilation errors." Keen, at the back, folded his arms. His face gave nothing away. But his eyes didn't leave Miguel. One by one, students around the room hit errors, groaned, deleted, restarted. Chad's muttering grew louder. His bravado thinned. "Compiler's lagging," he announced to no one. "Not my fault." His friends nodded, even as his screen filled with red. Miguel ran his first test case. It passed. He added more edge cases others might have overlooked. Null strings, oversized inputs, non-alphabetic characters. Everyone resolved clean. He wrote the final submission function and pressed enter. The room's screen blinked. The standings updated. When Miguel Alvarez, gasps broke the silence. Students craned their necks, checked, rechecked. It wasn't a fluke. His time had cut the problem in half. "Impossible," someone whispered. "It's planted," another said. "No," a voice argued. "He did it. I was watching." At the back, Langston, the professor who had pushed hardest for suspicion, tilted his head as if recalibrating what he thought he knew. Chad stared at the board, jaw tight. His own name hadn't even appeared yet. His solution was still failing. He slammed his palm against the table, earning a warning glance from a proctor. Miguel, meanwhile, didn't celebrate. He didn't raise his hands, didn't smile. He turned another page in his notebook and began annotating his own work, as if the victory were simply another step in the process. The discipline was unnerving to watch. Naomi, standing near the proctors, let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She whispered to Keen, "That wasn't luck. That was precision." Keen only nodded. His friends leaned in, trying to patch the cracks. "You'll get him in the next round. It's all strategy." But Chad didn't hear them. His gaze locked on Miguel, silent, steady, untouchable. The boy who wasn't supposed to enter, who wasn't supposed to matter, now sat at the top of the list again, unshaken by whispers or sabotage. And this time the anger didn't stay hidden. It rose in Chad's face, coloring it dark, until even the students beside him shifted uncomfortably. Chad's anger boiled over, as he realized Miguel wasn't just surviving. He was a threat, and the room was beginning to see it too. The doors of the engineering auditorium breathed out a stream of bodies and noise, the way a theater exhales after the credits. Fluorescence hummed. A poster for the invitational trembled on its pushpins as students brushed past. Miguel moved with the current, black notebook under his arm, face steady as stone pulled from a river. Behind him, Chad's voice, sharp, practiced, cut the air. "Alvarez." It was not a question. It was a hook. Miguel didn't turn. The corridor was lined with trophy cases, robotics awards, polished plaques, a photograph of last year's regional champions smiling in identical polos. His reflection slid across the glass, a thin figure with a notebook, an echo who would not slow for someone else's story. Chad stepped into his path near the water fountain, friends forming a loose crescent behind him. He had the same athlete's ease he wore everywhere, but something had shifted behind his eyes. Less charm now, more calculation. "You walk fast for a guy who doesn't need to be anywhere," Chad said, low and bright, the way people talk when they're making sure a crowd can hear. Miguel stopped. "I need to be home." "Cute," Chad said. "You got lucky again." Miguel looked at him. "I got precise again." The friends chuckled on cue. A couple of students slowed, phones tilting in their hands like habits they weren't sure they should indulge. Naomi hung back near a bulletin board, watchful. Donna from Academic Integrity stood farther down, talking to a proctor, but her eyes kept wandering toward the cluster. Chad smiled wider, the edges curling. "You know what I don't like about you," he said conversationally. "Besides the cheating, it's the attitude. You stand there with your little notebook, like the rules don't apply because you wrote your own. Where'd you learn that?" "Back home." "Back home is here," Miguel said. Chad's laugh was quick, dismissive. "Yeah? Then act like it. Speak the language when you code, not whatever rhythm you've got. I watched you. You don't type like us." A boy in a varsity jacket added, eager to belong. "Maybe that's the secret." He's translating the problem. Extra time. Maybe he's got a cousin feeding him answers. Another said. He's on a scholarship, right? Special pipeline. Special treatment. Miguel's jaw set. But he didn't bite. I typed what the problem, asked. You can file a complaint. Oh, they're already watching, Chad said, voice sweetening. Fairness optics, remember? We all saw the cameras. You should thank me. For what? Miguel asked. For making sure you don't embarrass yourself when they catch you, Chad said. Better to rip the bandage now than after nationals. Stay out of it, Harper, Chad said without looking at her. This is about fairness. Say something, the varsity jacket boy prodded. Or is this the part where you pretend you didn't understand the question? Miguel met his eyes. I understood the question. Do you always believe the worst thing about people like me? Miguel asked, voice even. For a moment, the sentence hung in the hall like a chord no one wanted to claim. Chad's friends shifted, some glancing down at their shoes, others doubling down because discomfort begged allies. Chad leaned in a fraction. I believe what I see, he said. I see a guy who doesn't belong in the top slot pretending he does. How would you know who belongs? Miguel asked. You've never had to ask permission. A ripple moved through the onlookers. Someone whispered, damn. But Miguel's tone wasn't sharp. It was weary. That made it land deeper. Chad's smile thinned. Okay, let me ask it plain. He lowered his voice. Intimacy turned knife. Are you even allowed to win? I mean, with your status. Chad raised his eyebrows as if the answer were adorable. You think your work is enough to change how this place runs? You think donors want your name on the board? You think recruiters want... He stopped as if remembering where the line was, and decided to step over it anyway. Someone from the diner representing Westbridge. The hallway went still. Noise from the stairwell drifted in. The muffled shouts of a club packing up. The metallic clatter of a dropped water bottle, and then receded, leaving the corridor taut. Miguel's breath moved once. Slow. My parents cleaned offices so I could be here, he said. You mock work because you've never had to do it. Chad's laugh cracked. Don't play that card. You want pity now? You want me to clap because you carried plates? This is about skill. You don't have it without help. Help? Miguel said. He angled his head, not aggressive. Curious. From who? From wherever you came from. Chad said. From whatever backdoor you and your friends use. From that TA you've got wrapped around you. Enough, Naomi said, stepping forward at last. Chad half-turned, eyes flashing. Oh look, Exhibit A. Is this where you verify his code for him again? Naomi's face colored. No one verified anything for anyone. You were making things up to see what sticks. Chad shrugged, careless. I don't have to make it up. Everyone's seen the posts. Everyone knows the type. There was the quietest murmur at that word type, like the hallway itself objected. Donna had begun to walk toward them, the corners of her mouth compressed into something that wasn't quite neutrality anymore. Miguel's silence thickened. He didn't move. He didn't argue the word, or the world behind it. He withheld something Chad needed. Reaction seen, proof that he could be rattled, and that withholding hollowed Chad's triumph. It made the insult sound smaller, pettier. It made the room notice how the laughter that followed him always required prompting. Say it, Chad hissed, temper flashing now that the script wasn't granting him applause. Say how you did it. Say how you... Miguel cut in, voice low, almost kind. I wrote code. Chad scoffed. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters, Miguel said. A new voice entered. Hesitant. Maybe leave him alone, man, said Harper, the girl from algorithms. Her voice shook, then steadied. He won. You lost. It happens. Chad pivoted. To who? To him. Twice? You think that's how this works? Maybe it is now, Harper said. A long moment stretched. Chad glanced around, gauging the room, calculating the risk of pushing farther. He forced a grin back onto his face, the way people paste labels over cracks. Relax, he said to the group at large. Just asking questions. Chad ignored her. His eyes found Miguel again. Look at me, he said. If you weren't hiding something, you'd talk. People who belong don't hide. Miguel lifted his gaze fully then, and for the first time since the auditorium, he looked straight through the space between them. There was no triumph in it. There was fatigue, and an iron Miguel didn't show anyone, unless invited. I'm not hiding, he said. I'm choosing. Which part of me gets to stay intact? Miguel said. The words landed with a weight that made even the phones dip. A boy at the edge of the crowd lowered his screen, suddenly aware he was recording something too raw to turn into content. Chad opened his mouth, closed it, then went for the only lever he thought would still work. You know what, man? Maybe you're right. Maybe this isn't about code. Maybe it's about optics. About what Westbridge looks like when they put you on their brochure. We took a chance. Look at us. Miguel didn't blink. You really can't imagine a version where I'm here because I'm good. Chad smiled with his teeth this time. I can imagine a version where you're here because someone needed a story. A door at the end of the hall clicked open. A small group stepped out. 2 faculty members, a man in a blazer with a campus visitor badge, and a woman in a charcoal coat with a lanyard flipped backward against her chest. They were mid-conversation, but the shape of the crowd pulled their attention. The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in the tableau, the half-circle, the phones, the boy with the notebook pinned to the wall by words that smelled like something older than this week. Is there a problem here? The man in the blazer asked, voice carrying institutional calm. No problem, Chad said instantly. The smile restored. Just passionate debate. School spirit. Donna arrived then, and folded herself between the boys, with a professional smile made of steel. We're done, she said. A close of record. Chad tipped his chin at Miguel. Good humor reattached like a mask. See you in the finals. Speedster. Hope English is offered. He began to turn, satisfied he'd gotten what he could from the moment. Doubt planted. Laughter primed. A story framed. Miguel didn't move. He could feel the outlines of the insult he hadn't received, the one that would have been easy to throw back. He didn't. He watched Chad's back, then looked at the faces in the crowd, the ones who had come for spectacle and found themselves caught in a mirror. As the onlookers thinned, whispers darted. Was that recorded? He's out of line. It's just jokes. It's not. Naomi came closer, but didn't speak, a choice he recognized as respect. Harper offered a small, shaky nod, and slipped away. At the far end of the corridor, the woman in the charcoal coat had not moved. She had turned her lanyard over now, the white letters visible against navy. Cipher Core Labs, senior talent. Her gaze wasn't on the crowd, it was on the boy with the notebook, the one who had faced a wall of talk and chosen to say almost nothing. The man in the blazer touched her elbow. You wanted to meet the Whitmore kid, right? Donor's son. Board's favorite. She didn't answer. She was already walking, expression unreadable, toward the water fountain where Miguel stood alone with his notebook, the crowd dissolving into ordinary traffic around him. The woman stopped a step away, the badge on her lanyard catching the light. Senior talent, Cipher Core Labs, and said quietly, Miguel, do you have a minute? The hallway cleared slowly, like a tide pulling back after crashing against rock. Students drifted toward exits, their whispers fading into the stairwells. Miguel stood still by the water fountain, notebook clutched loosely in one hand. His chest felt heavy, but his face betrayed nothing. The silence he chose had been sharper than any insult, yet it left him drained, as though he'd run a marathon with his thoughts alone. The woman in the charcoal coat remained. Her badge still read Cipher Core Labs. Senior talent. She watched him with the steady focus of someone trained to see beneath surfaces. Miguel, do you have a minute? She asked, her voice even, neither warm nor cold. He blinked, surprised she knew his name. Yes, he said cautiously. She extended a card, her hand unhurried. My name is Elena Ruiz. I recruit for Cipher Core. We're here observing the invitational qualifiers. I saw what just happened. Miguel hesitated before taking the card. The cardstock was thick, the letters embossed. It didn't feel like something meant for him. Elena studied his expression. I won't pretend this was an interview. But resilience tells me as much about a candidate as code does. You kept your composure when you had no reason to. Miguel lowered his gaze. Some people think silence means weakness. Not the right people, Elena said. She glanced toward the end of the hall where Chad was laughing again, louder than necessary, already spinning the scene for his friends. What they call weakness, we sometimes call discipline. You should know there are eyes on you that aren't looking for failure. Miguel nodded slightly, unsure if he believed her. Recruiters weren't saints. They saw value, they saw risk, but her voice carried a weight different from the professors who had debated him in absentia, different from classmates who needed to laugh at someone quieter to feel loud themselves. I'll be around for the finals, Elena said. Focus on your work. Let the rest take care of itself. Then she was gone, blending into the departing crowd with professional ease, leaving Miguel with a card he didn't know if he was allowed to hold. By the next morning, the hallway incident had metastasized. The meme page posted a blurry still from someone's phone. Chad's grin visible, Miguel's posture stiff. Harper half-turned like she wanted to intervene. The caption read, "When the foreign exchange of ideas gets too real." Miguel wasn't foreign, but that wasn't the point. The comments bent facts until they fit preconceptions. Figures. Explains the times. Macro keys in Spanish. Funny how the TA always hovers when he's coding. It was a script Miguel had seen his whole life. Doubt first, then mockery, then myth. If you repeated it enough, people forgot to ask for proof. Chad played his part well. In group chats, he dropped lines calculated to sound reasonable. "I don't care if he wins. I just want to know it's fair." Or "We all saw those screenshots. Don't tell me I'm the only one wondering." He never accused directly. He didn't have to. He knew suggestion was more dangerous than declaration. By lunchtime, the whispers had teeth. Students in the dining hall paused when Miguel walked past. Some nodding in quiet sympathy. Others smirking like they knew a secret. A boy at the soda machine muttered, "Guess the rules are different when you've got friends in admin." Miguel carried his tray to a corner table and ate in silence, each bite turning dry before it reached his throat. Across the room, Chad performed confidence, telling a story with his hands spread wide, his laugh rehearsed. A few students leaned in, eager for proximity to someone who seemed untouchable. Naomi slid into the seat across from Miguel, her tray untouched. "Don't look at the page," she said. "I already did." "Then don't look again. They're treating rumor like data." Miguel set down his fork. "That's the problem. They don't care if it's data. They care if it's easy to believe." She lowered her voice. "Elena Ruiz is still on campus. She asked me for your schedule." Miguel's head lifted slightly. "Why?" "She said she wants to see how you work, how you move. Not just the finals, but the lead-up." "She's watching me," he said, more to himself than to her. "Maybe that's not bad," Naomi said. "Recruiters are different from faculty. They don't need to protect an institution. They need to spot talent before someone else does." Miguel thought of Elena's words. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's discipline. For the first time, the phrase didn't feel like defense. It felt like possibility. That afternoon, a faculty meeting buzzed behind closed doors. Chad's name was mentioned with the reverence owed to donors. Miguel's with the suspicion reserved for anomalies. Langston pressed again for an investigation. Walker countered with cautious optimism. Keene argued process over prejudice, though his voice carried the fatigue of a man who knew he wasn't winning hearts. In the back row, Elena Ruiz observed silently, her visitor badge granting her access. She wrote nothing, asked nothing. But when Langston repeated, "We can't risk a scandal over a student who doesn't belong," she looked up sharply, the expression on her face unreadable but final. Evening fell. Miguel returned to the lab, notebooks in hand, determined to practice on the sterile machines the way he'd face them in competition. He set timers, traced algorithms by hand before typing, rebuilt solutions from memory. His body ached, but his mind found rhythm in the repetition. Halfway through, he felt a shift in the room. He glanced toward the door and saw Elena, quiet as a shadow, leaning against the frame. "You don't type like most people," she said softly. Miguel tensed. That's what Chad said. Her mouth flickered with a smile. He meant it as an insult. "I mean it as observation. You type like someone who solves before he writes." Miguel looked back at the code. "It's the only way I know." "Good," Elena said. "Don't change it to fit their comfort. Innovation doesn't look familiar." Her words lingered after she left. The next morning, Chad escalated again. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards. Crude mock-ups of a Westbridge banner, featuring Miguel's face beneath the words "Affirmative Action Champion." Most had been torn down by noon, but not before photos circulated. Miguel found one taped to his locker. He peeled it off slowly, folded it twice and placed it into his notebook. He said nothing, but his silence was starting to shift from defense to defiance. Naomi found him at the vending machines. "They're going too far." "They've always gone too far," Miguel said. "They just have a bigger microphone now." "You're not going to fight it?" "I'll fight it where it matters. On stage." He nodded. That evening, the dean's office sent a campus-wide email. Subject line: "Final round announcement." Miguel opened it on his phone. standing under a lamppost where moths circled the light like restless thoughts. The message was brief but heavy. The final round of the National Codebreaking Invitational Qualifier will be held Saturday at 6 p.m. This event will be live-streamed nationally. Students, faculty, alumni, and industry partners across the country will be watching as Westbridge competes to send one champion to the national stage. The words pulsed against the dark, like a verdict. Miguel exhaled, the cool air sharp in his lungs. The whispers, the sabotage, the lies, none of them could be avoided now. The stage would be larger than he'd ever imagined. And everyone would see. The final round was announced, live-streamed nationally, where Miguel's silence would no longer be private, and Chad's lies would face the light. Saturday came dressed like a verdict. The engineering auditorium had been refitted overnight into a studio. Trusses of lights, 2 roaming cameras, a jib arm sweeping the rows, and a LED wall counting down in a clean, merciless font. A banner ran along the bottom of the stream preview. Westbridge Qualifier Final Round. Live while a silent chat waterfall poured past on the moderator's monitor. Emojis replaced by words that could wound or lift without moving a single chair in the room. Miguel arrived 10 minutes early with his black notebook. The proctors checked his ID, wanded him for devices, and nodded him through. His table sat front and center, an island under the lights. He placed the notebook down, then folded his hands to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Chad swaggered to his station late and waved at a camera as if it had come to see him specifically. "Welcome to the show," Chad murmured when he passed Miguel, voice dipped in sugar. "Don't blink." Miguel said nothing. The silence inside him felt different tonight, not empty, not fearful, more like a room he'd prepared, with a chair where he could sit down in his own mind. Up in the control nook, Donna from Academic Integrity stood alongside 2 university IT techs and a streaming producer. Naomi hovered near the proctor table, headset crooked around her neck, eyes trained on Miguel's row. Keene stood at the back with arms folded, the line of his mouth steady. Professor Langston took a seat beside the dean, a legal pad open on his knee like a ledger of predictions. From the aisle, Elena Ruiz set down her leather notebook and watched like she'd been watching athletes at a starting line her whole career. A producer's voice snapped over the room audio, bright with stagecraft. "We are live in 12:11. Far away in a small apartment with a sagging sofa, Miguel's mother propped her phone against a stack of cookbooks and sat forward, elbows on her knees. His father came in late from a Saturday shift, steel dust on his sleeves, and dropped into the chair beside her. "Is this?" his mother breathed. "Mira, I see him," his father said softly, quiet like always. Back on campus, the host took the mic. "Good evening, everyone, students, faculty, alumni, and viewers around the country. Tonight, 20 finalists compete for one slot to represent Westbridge at the National Codebreaking Invitational. Round time, 2 hours. Problem set, 1 real-world composite. Stakes, very real." He smiled toward the front. "Finalists, please place your hands visible on the table. Cameras will observe keystrokes, but not screen." A low ripple moved through the audience. The Fairness optics had teeth now. 2 overhead cameras, a small hand cam on each finalist's station. It wasn't only the code that would be judged, it was the way the code came into being. Chad raised his hand and wiggled his fingers at the nearest lens. "Say hi to Mom," he joked. Laughter came from the row behind him, relieved, like a pressure valve popping. Miguel opened his notebook, and out of habit, wrote the date. Under it, he drew a small square and then a line. It was nothing and everything, a space to put thought before it flew. The host gestured to the LED wall. "Tonight's challenge, designed with input from the National Cryptography Association, replicates a field scenario, a message encrypted by adversaries mixing techniques. Expect layered ciphers, shifting keys, and decoys designed to mimic human error. Your task: recover the plaintext with justification. Submissions auto-grade. Standings update periodically. Any question?" Chad lifted a hand. "Can we get bonus points for finishing early? I've got dinner plans." The room laughed harder than the joke deserved. The host grinned. "Practiced. Finish first and we'll send dessert to your table." Donna's headset crackled. "We are live in 3, 2. The timer hit 2 zeros and began to fall. The problem unfolded on screens with all the generosity of a locked door. A block of text wrapped in something that wanted to be a visionaire but kept slipping. A transposition grid with a route that changed on a schedule that wasn't a schedule. and a trail of noise tokens that looked like human typos until you placed them on a diagonal and they turned into a map. If you guessed at it, it would punish you. If you listened, it might sing. Cute, Chad said, already typing. Confidence like fireworks. They gave us training wheels. Miguel did not touch his keys. He read once, twice, and let the pattern press itself against the inside of his skull. Then he drew a grid, a ladder, a small sketch of a key schedule that might be a Fibonacci without announcing itself. He wrote the shape of a function before its name. When he began to type, he didn't backspace for a long time. In homes and dorm lounges, in break rooms, lit by the blue-white of the stream, comments flowed. He's not even looking up. Dude in the middle is showboating. Who's the quiet kid? The quiet kid is the story. Lol, I'll bet he's got macros hidden in his sleeves. Shut up. And near the back, Langston leaned toward the dean. Watch his hands. No hesitation. That's not normal. Or it's practiced, the dean said. Naomi, without taking her eyes off Miguel, murmured into her headset. Keystroke cadence matches round 2. No spikes. No pastes. Chad kept up a running commentary as he coded narration to keep the camera on him. Shift here, blah blah. Route cipher trying to be cute. There we go. Love when they think we won't see that decoy. Elementary. He glanced sideways at the nearest camera and gave a small shrug like he couldn't help being talented. The first half hour passed like weather. Some students worked under it. Some complained about it. Miguel stayed steady. His fingers moved like a pianist who had written the piece he was playing. At 1:27:13, Chad slammed run and watched his test harness cheer. He raised both hands. We eating early, he announced, and hit submit. The scoreboard didn't change. No new name at the top. No time posted. The stream's producer frowned. Lag? Donna's screen flashed a log. She leaned in. Submission received. Autograder in queue. Chad reclined, theatrically calm. Let me know when they catch up, he said loud enough to travel. Miguel did not look up. He found the second layer at 1:22:48, the one nested inside an innocuous series of capital letters, every fourth token. He had nearly missed it. He drew a line in his notebook and wrote beneath it, remember to look where people hide pride. He built a small helper function and stitched it into the solver so invisibly it looked like it had been there all along. Elena Ruiz scribbled something on her pad and whispered to herself. He debugs before the bug appears. The producer beside her, not meaning to be part of any story, nodded anyway. At 1:50, a campus janitor paused in the lobby outside the auditorium and watched the stream through the glass. He didn't know ciphers. He knew hands. The quiet kid's hands didn't flinch. Halfway in, the challenge revealed its favorite trick. The key schedule wasn't Fibonacci. It imitated Fibonacci before shifting to Lucas numbers at the halfway mark. Chad's code, tuned to catch the pretense and not the pivot, began to stumble. He adjusted on the fly, swore under his breath, and shot a look toward the proctors, as if they'd moved the goalposts while he was mid-kick. Think they tweaked it live, he told his friends, who were not allowed to answer. Miguel lifted his palms from the keys and shook out his fingers, not dramatic, simply kind to his body. He drew a small spiral in the margin and wrote LN beneath it, then refactored his schedule function. The change slid in like a breath. He ran his full test suite and got green across the board. He didn't submit. He scanned the playing test, frowned, and scrolled back to the top of his own code. A line 3 functions up bothered him. It was correct but inelegant. He fixed it, smiled almost imperceptibly, and only then hovered over submit. Chad jabbed a finger at the scoreboard. Glitchy stream, he announced. I've been done. Still nothing, the producer said, eyes on the back end. No score posted. Check the grader, Donna said calmly. Not the stream. In the apartment lit by a phone, Miguel's mother leaned forward. Why are they not saying his name? Because they are slow, his father said. But the boy is not. At A039:14, the first standings update rolled. 2 names flashed at the top, neither Miguel's nor Chad's. A girl named Harper appeared third, and blinked at the wall, startled and proud. The room applauded softly. Chad's face cooled. He had planned his victory lap too early. He leaned back toward the screen, whispered, "Come on," to the grader and reran his suite. This time one test failed. A corner case he hadn't promised himself he'd write. He fixed it fast, chest high, breath short. Miguel pressed submit at 0:32. He did not look up. He took his notebook and in the space where he'd drawn the square at the start, wrote one more thing: "This is the voice you keep when rooms try to take it." The scoreboard waited, as though it needed a beat to prepare for a new narrative. "Update coming," the producer warned. The LED wall refreshed. Names shuffled. A new line pulsed at the top. "Miguel Alvarez." The auditorium breathed out. A collective exhale caught by microphones and sent to living rooms and kitchens around the country. Some viewers cheered. Some narrowed their eyes, remembering the rumor and not the work. In the control nook, the dean allowed himself a smile he didn't show the room. Langston looked down at his legal pad and didn't write anything at all. Chad stared at the wall as if it were a mirror that had betrayed him. His jaw clicked. "Okay," he said to himself. "Okay." He refocused, eyes hard, and started tuning his performance for a strong second. The challenge still had one last turn. A verification step that demanded a short justification for the recovered key schedule. The words didn't need to be many, only precise. Miguel typed a paragraph that read like a map. No flourish, no apology, just the route he'd taken and why. He clicked finalize. At 0:18:49, Chad pushed his final build and hit submit again with the defiance of a man slamming a door. The room paused, waiting to see whose narrative would stick. The grader blinked. A red flag appeared on Chad's screen, tiny and merciless. "Runtime error. Out of bounds at index 0." He froze. The camera caught the exact moment. Bravado met arithmetic. "Must be a bad string," he said too quickly. "It's the platform." Donna's monitor showed the truth. A single unchecked access after the key schedule pivot. Fixable, not ignorable. Chad swallowed, recompiled, and hit submit again. The grader thought, then spat the same red. A murmur moved through the audience. Then the stream chat. Then the rooms where people watched, not all of them rooting for the work. On the LED wall, the standings pulsed once more. One Miguel Alvarez, held fast. Chad Whitmore dropped to 5th, as the clock slid under 0:15:0, and the cameras drifted closer to capture the exact shape of a collapse. Chad's voice cracked across the aisle, too loud for the room to call it an inside thought. "No way this is how it ends." Miguel did not answer. The timer kept falling. With 15 minutes on the clock, Chad's code flashed runtime error again, red as a siren, while Miguel's submission stayed locked in green at the top of the board, the whole country watching to see which story the last minutes would allow to live. The timer on the LED wall hit 0:10:0:10, and the auditorium felt like a heart holding its beat. Chad hunched over his station, pounding keys with the rhythm of desperation, every few seconds whispering, "Come on." His friends in the second row leaned forward, their confidence drained, their encouragement muted to murmurs. The cameras stayed on him, but the narrative had already shifted. They were no longer following a victor. They were documenting a fall. Miguel, by contrast, sat still. His submission had locked green 20 minutes ago. He had nothing left to prove. Yet his eyes scanned the problem text again, slow and searching, like a reader looking for a missed line in a poem. He knew better than to leave empty spaces unexamined. Then he saw it. Buried beneath the Sabotage, hidden in what looked like a comment block for documentation, was a string of symbols that didn't match the others. They were irregular, almost lazy, as if added at the last second. Most competitors would dismiss them as metadata, but Miguel tilted his head, feeling the quiet itch in his brain that whispered, "This is intentional." "Why are you staring at the screen?" Naomi whispered from the sidelines, voice low into her headset. "You've already won." Miguel didn't answer. He tapped the symbols again with his pencil and began sketching grids. At 0:07:42, his fingers moved to the keyboard. This time not with the fluid efficiency of before, but with exploratory caution. He built a parser, stripped the junk characters, and ran a frequency analysis. Something began to take shape. Letters, scattered like shards of glass forming words. In the control nook, one of the IT techs noticed. "What's he doing? That's not part of the problem set." Donna leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait, look at the raw data feed." Sure enough, in the system log sat an optional line, unmentioned in the instructions, flagged only as extended task, Enigma. It had been added by the judges, as a kind of Easter egg, something to test curiosity, something they assumed no undergraduate would even attempt under pressure. "Impossible," the tech whispered. "No one's ever solved that." Langston looked up sharply. "What are you talking about?" Donna pointed. He found the hidden layer. At 0:05:59, Miguel's screen displayed a block of plain text that hadn't existed for anyone else. It wasn't just a solution, it was an answer to a question no one had asked out loud. He stared at it, then submitted quietly. The auditorium's LED wall blinked. A new message appeared above the standings. Hidden challenge completed. Miguel Alvarez. What was that? He found the secret. Extra round? He's playing a different game. Chad looked up, confused. What is that? That wasn't in the packet. The host at the mic blinked twice, shuffled his notes, and then broke into a grin that wasn't rehearsed. Ladies and gentlemen, something extraordinary has just happened. For the first time in Westbridge Invitational history, a finalist has discovered and solved a hidden bonus challenge, embedded by the judging panel for internal testing. That finalist is Miguel Alvarez. The applause started hesitant, then swelled, rolling through the room like a tide. Even professors who had argued against him couldn't disguise their astonishment. Keene allowed himself the smallest nod, a teacher watching vindication bloom. Chad's hands froze above his keyboard. He looked around as though the room itself had betrayed him, then down at his own screen where his code still stuttered and read. The sound of clapping pressed against him like weight. He forced a smile, muttered something to himself, but the cameras had already turned away. Miguel didn't rise when the timer hit 000. He sat quietly, notebook closed, palms flat on the table. The noise in the auditorium blurred at the edges. He heard clapping, cheering, voices calling his name, but it all felt distant, like sound traveling underwater. He thought of his parents at home, watching on a flickering stream. He thought of nights in the diner, of his father's hands raw from factory shifts, of his mother's quiet humming when the world had been too heavy for words. He thought of every laugh he'd endured in the lab, every figures he's not from here anyway, every whisper dressed as a fact, and he realized none of that noise mattered now. His work had spoken. The scoreboard froze. Miguel Alvarez, hidden challenge completed.
Harper Wells.
3 Arjun Patel. 4 Donna Lee. 5 Chad Whitmore. The host stepped forward, microphone trembling slightly from the energy of the crowd. History made tonight, at Westbridge. Miguel Alvarez will represent this university at the National Codebreaking Invitational. And more than that, he's done something no competitor in this program's history has ever achieved. The audience stood. Students stamped their feet. Some chanted his name. Chad sat rigid in his chair, face pale, the cameras refusing to leave his humiliation behind. Naomi smiled from the sidelines, tears stinging her eyes. She whispered into her headset, "He did it. He actually did it." Donna, standing in the control nook, folded her arms. "No one can question that," she said firmly, loud enough for Langston to hear. Langston said nothing. His pen rolled off the pad and clattered onto the floor, the sound sharp in the midst of applause. Then, before the clapping could die down, movement stirred on stage. Elena Ruiz, in her charcoal coat, walked with deliberate calm toward Miguel's table. The cameras followed instinctively. The host blinked, then stepped aside, sensing something larger than his script unfolding. Elena stopped at Miguel's side. She extended her hand. "Miguel, my name is Elena Ruiz, Senior Talent Recruiter for Cypher Core Labs. I've watched you closely, not just today, but all week. Your skill speaks loudly, but your resilience speaks louder. On behalf of Cypher Core, I'd like to offer you a position with us, effective immediately after the invitational, with full sponsorship for the national competition." Gasps tore through the auditorium. Even the applause faltered under the weight of the announcement. Students stared, professors exchanged glances, and Chad's expression collapsed into disbelief. Miguel blinked at her, unsure if he'd heard correctly. His hand hovered above hers, trembling not from fear but from the sudden realization that this moment was real. Before the applause even ended, the recruiter offered Miguel a life-changing opportunity on stage, an offer that could alter not just his future, but the story others had tried to write for him. Applause washed over the stage in uneven waves, cresting and breaking, as if the room couldn't decide whether to cheer history or catch its breath. Elena's hand lingered in the air. Miguel looked from her card to the scoreboard and back again, the moment too large to fit inside his chest. "Thank you," he said, voice steady but quiet. "I need to call my parents. But yes, let's talk." It wasn't a Hollywood yes, and that made it land harder. Elena smiled like she preferred precision to spectacle. "I'll wait," she said, and stepped aside, letting the cameras return to him rather than to her. The host tried to reclaim the microphone. voice bright with adrenaline. What a night at Westbridge, he boomed. Let's hear it one more time for. The room had already turned. Head swiveled toward the aisle where Chad rose slowly from his station, the weight of an unmade myth settling on his shoulders. His friends started to clap. Reflex. Loyalty. But the sound thinned before it reached him. He tried on a grin that fit yesterday's face. Not tonight's. Good run, one friend said too loudly, as if volume might substitute for conviction. Next time, another added. But his eyes had wandered to the stage. Chad swallowed, glanced up at the LED wall, where runtime arrow had flashed like a verdict. He looked for a joke, and found none. When he turned toward Miguel, the cameras caught it. The tug of something fragile under the muscles that had always performed confidence for him. Miguel did not look back. He stood, closed his notebook, and nodded once to the crowd. Not a bow, not a fist raised, just a spare acknowledgement that the work was finished. The applause returned, broader now, less shocked, more sure. It rolled past Chad without touching him. In the second row, Harper wiped at her eyes, laughing at herself. I didn't think I'd cry at a cipher, she muttered, and the guy beside her grinned helplessly, all his second-hand cynicism dissolving. Near the back, Professor Langston remained seated, hands folded over his legal pad, the posture of a man reassessing an entire framework in real time. Walker leaned toward Keene and whispered, "You were right." Keene didn't gloat. He was, he said simply. The stream chat split along predictable seams, some hearts, some knives. But on campus phones, a new meme had already overtaken the old. A screenshot of the scoreboard with a caption reading, "Confidence out of bounds at index 0. Someone pasted Chad's halftime smirk under it. Another set the red error box to a ringtone. A third posted the clip of Miguel discovering the hidden challenge with the words, "He solved the part you didn't even know existed." By the time students spilled into the lobby, the whisper network that had feasted on Miguel had turned to its easiest new meal. Guess Swagger crashes too, someone said at the water fountain. He was doing bits for the camera while the other guy was coding, another added. Figures. Chad heard it all. He kept his jaw set, the line of his mouth hard enough to hurt. At the trophy case, a freshman asked for a selfie, and then, realizing the timing, stammered, "Sorry, my bad," and backed away. The self-assurance that had once arranged rooms for him now struggled to find a chair. "Whitmore," a voice called. Chad nodded stiffly and followed him down the corridor. He didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen the faces he used to command, now lifted towards someone else. Out in the atrium, Naomi found Miguel at the edge of a knot of classmates. She didn't hug him. She knew his face when he was saving what he felt for when it would matter most. "You did it," she said. "I did my work," he answered. And it wasn't modesty. It was the truth he could live inside. "Your parents?" she asked. He lifted his phone. A message from his mother blinked at the top. "We saw. We are here." A second from his father. Proud is too small a word. Miguel exhaled. And some private room in him opened. For years, Miguel had learned that quiet didn't protect him. Tonight, strangely, it had. The video showed him choosing not to give Chad the scene he wanted. It showed discipline under pressure, and it showed the uglier thing unclothed. The development office's smile wilted. The dean typed a draft of a statement on his phone. Langston stared at the floor as if it had spoken. Walker looked at Miguel, then at the hallway clip on her screen, and said aloud to no one, "We owe him an apology." Near the stairs, Elena watched the lobby dynamics adjust themselves. She didn't interfere. Part of recruiting was seeing who people became when the lights shifted, who ran to the center, who moved to the sides, who stayed true to the shape they'd been all along. "People are gonna clip it unfairly," one said. "They always do." "They don't know you," another offered. Chad's laugh sounded like a cough. "They know enough," he said. He glanced across the atrium. Under a banner that read Westbridge Proud, Miguel spoke softly to Elena, to Naomi, to Donna, to a camera he didn't seem to notice. Students waited their turn to say words they'd never said to him in class. The room had found a different center of gravity. "Fake," Chad said automatically, breath quickening. "It's fake." But the student paper's account had already posted the image, with a cautious caption, "We're verifying." If true, this shows an attempt to sabotage a competitor. The replies arrived like weather. Some gave him the benefit of the doubt. Many didn't, and threaded among them were classmates who had moved through the week breathing in insinuation and now exhaled it back at him. "You did that?" one of his friends whispered. Not unkind, just stunned. Chad's face hardened. "I said it was fake." The friend flinched at the tone. "Right. Yeah." The sound of a pedestal cracking is very small. You hear it only if you're standing on it. Inside the auditorium, Donna huddled with IT. "We can't comment," she told them, "but lock down access logs." The tech nodded. "Already pulled." The VPN hit on Alvarez's account last night came from a fraternity subnet. Donna's eyes closed, brief, tired. "Then don't leak. Do it right. DPN. Keen approached Miguel. He didn't lead with justification or process. "You were brilliant," he said simply. "And we should have said that first." Miguel met his eyes. "Thank you." He didn't rescue him from the rest. "Tomorrow," Keen added, "we'll discuss protections for nationals. No more optics. Just the work." Miguel nodded. "That's all I want." Students drifted in and out. Selfies happening 2 steps from earnest apologies. Harper approached Chad. "Careful. Talk to the paper," she suggested. "Own what you can. Fix what you can. Or at least stop hurting what you can." He stared at her. "You think this is my fault?" "I think it's your responsibility," she said. "There's a difference." He turned away, swallowing anger that had nowhere to go now that the room no longer fed it. The memes multiplied by the minute. A looped clip of Chad throwing his hands up at runtime error with the caption, "When swagger meets bounds checking." A split screen of Miguel's stillness and Chad's performance labeled compiler versus compliance. Cruel humor travels fast. Tonight it traveled backward, repurposed. The same engine now aimed at the boy who had fueled it. Miguel saw the jokes flicker on phones around him and felt no pleasure in them. A laugh can be a blade in any direction. He kept his expression even, his shoulders low. He signed a few notebook covers, declined a few others with a small motion of his hand that said, "I need to breathe." He never said, "I told you so." He didn't have to. The work had already said it cleaner. Elena returned to his side. "There's a press scrum forming," she said, nodding toward the lobby doors where cameras gathered like black birds. "You don't owe anyone everything tonight. But when you do speak, choose your words like you choose your variables." "What do they want?" he asked. "Your origin story," she said. "The part they ignored until it made good TV." He thought about it. The first time he'd read about Dijkstra in a library, older than the bus route that carried him there. The way his mother tucked a sandwich into his bag like a prayer. The night a teacher accused him of copying because he had finished early, and the room could not understand how. The drip in the kitchen sink, the text that clothed cruelty in winks, the sting of hearing type used like a diagnosis. None of it fit into a soundbite. None of it deserved to be trimmed. "Do I have to become a symbol?" he asked.
"No," Elena said. "You can become a person in public. It's harder. It lasts longer."
At the edge of the atrium, a local news reporter lifted a mic over the heads of the crowd. "Where's Miguel?" she asked, not to anyone in particular, but the question carried. Another outlet flanked her. Phones elevated. Students turned as one. "Ready?" Naomi asked him, not as a handler, but as a friend offering an exit he could take or not. Miguel's phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. This one different in tone. "You don't know me. My brothers made those flyers. I'm sorry. I'll say it out loud if you want me to." He stared at it the way something ugly sometimes shifted into something usable. He slid the phone into his pocket. "I'll speak," he said. "But I'm not going to perform." Elena nodded. "Good." They stepped toward the lobby doors. The crowd angled. Camera lights blinked alive, washing the corridor in a too bright day. Chad, standing off to the side with his friends, watched the motion coalesce around Miguel. He looked smaller than he had ever looked in this building. His mouth opened, then shut. For a second his face wasn't anger or arrogance. It was a boy's confusion at discovering his reflexes didn't work in this air. Miguel reached the rope line. Microphones arched toward him. The noise tightened into a single expectant hush. A reporter in a navy blazer leaned in. "Miguel," she said, every syllable tuned for television. "People have watched you win in silence all week. Why were you so quiet?" She lifted the mic higher. A cue all these years. The lenses crowded closer. The question hanging above the hum. Why the silence? Why now, waiting for the first words he would decide to give the world? The microphones pressed forward like curious hands. The camera lights painted Miguel's face in white glare, erasing the quiet shadows that had always been his cover. The reporter's question, Why were you so quiet all these years? Hung in the air, vibrating across the atrium through the live stream into living rooms where strangers leaned closer to their screens. Miguel let the silence breathe first. For once it was not a shield, but a stage. He scanned the faces, classmates who had laughed at him in the lab, professors who had doubted him behind closed doors, administrators who had hesitated to stand against whispers, and friends who had carried faith like contraband. He thought of the very first mockery, that day in the computer lab, when Chad's voice had carried louder than code ever could. He had lowered his head then, not because he was defeated, but because he had been building something inside that the room wasn't ready to see. He lifted his chin now. The cameras caught the change. Naomi exhaled, smiling as tears welled, knowing he had chosen exactly the right words, the kind you couldn't meme into mockery, the kind that lived beyond a clip. Keen closed his eyes for a second, humbled. Donna smiled without apology. Even the dean clapped with both hands, the sound sharp in the microphone's pickup. Off to the side, Chad stood stiff, the roar around him moving past like a current too strong to swim against. The same silence Miguel had carried all semester wrapped around Chad now, but in his case, it was not focus. It was emptiness, the absence of a center he had mistaken for certainty. The meme of the night no longer wore Miguel's face. It wore his. Miguel raised his notebook once more, not to write, but to hold, to show it mattered, that all along, every margin, every scribbled line, every erased mistake had been part of the foundation. The crowd noticed. A chant began, low, steady, building. Miguel, Miguel. The host tried to regain control of the event, but the story had escaped script. Elena Ruiz stepped forward, once more commanding the stage without a microphone. The cameras swiveled instinctively. Hungry, she waited for the chant to quiet, then looked at Miguel with the expression of someone who had already seen his future written in the clear lines of his work. Miguel Alvarez, she said, voice carrying even without amplification. You don't just leave this competition a champion, you leave it with an open door. CipherCore Labs is prepared to sponsor your studies, bring you onto our research team, and support you at the national and international stages. This is not a courtesy, it's recognition. You've proven what we rarely see, even in professionals, that brilliance without arrogance is the most dangerous kind. Gasps rippled again, softer but deeper. This was no symbolic scholarship, no pat on the back. It was a contract, a future carved where none had been offered. Miguel bowed his head once, not to hide, but to receive it with the same grace he had carried through every insult. He took Elena's hand, the cameras captured it, the crowd roared again, and the moment crystallized into history. Behind them, Chad sank into a chair. For the first time in his life, he had no quip, no laughter to summon, no audience willing to wait for him to find one. The future he had assumed would roll toward him without effort had been handed, in full view, to the boy he had called weak. And Miguel? He stood where he had once been mocked. Quiet, but this time respected. His silence was no longer misread. It was understood. As the applause carried, Elena slipped a folder into Miguel's hand, a contract for a future Chad could never imagine. Stories like Miguel's aren't just fiction. They're happening every day in classrooms, workplaces, and streets around us.